Tervist. Hello everyone. It's time to start our academic pop conference, Best of BFM on academic field. Unfortunately, there is small slight changes in our schedule. First presenter is not here. She is in hospital right now. Wish her all the best, and hopefully we will have a possibility to get her presentation a little bit later. Tere tulemast kõigile. Alustame siis tänast Best of BFM-i või eesti keeles peaks siis ütlema BFM-i parimikku akadeemilisel väljal. Meie tänane konverents keskendub üliõpilaste poolt tehtud akadeemilistele uurimustöödele ja anname ülevaate siis nii bakalaureuse kui magistritööde paremikust. Osa ettekandeid tulevad kenasti siit samast sellest saalist, osa on üle interneti nähtavad ka meie YouTube'i kanalil. Neid töid ma kohe tutvustan teile, milline saab olema siis meie tänane programm. Me alustame kommunikatsioonijuhtimise magistri Tea Marimadzi tööga in relationship with Estonian communication of intercultural couples. Ja selle ettekande me vaatame ära Zoomi vahenduse. Pärast seda tuleb CDF Dündari Ristmeedia bakalaureuse lõpetanu töö How to create effective group environment in Transmedia production based on a Transmedia project suite issues. Then we moved to Estonian language presentations. It will be a presentation by Sandra Sander about Estonian and US politicians' Facebook communication. Then English language presentation by Elina Buivite, Keeping National Identity in the Age of Globalization, Practices Among Latvian Young Adults Living Abroad. And the first session will be ended by Emily Polverk. And in Estonian presentation he will talk about digitalization of Estonian newspaper and what are these influencers which are connected to the payments. At 11:20 we should have a panel discussion with all the presenters about their work. And the second half of today starts 12:15 with music teacher Kadi Voosel giving overview about music students. Wow, now I am in a problem. This music is not my field at all, but the title is how music has influenced in 7th or 9th class. Then we will have a presentation by new Transmedia master student Varvara Reino about Russian language audiences. Then following Kate Chakure from Transmedia, the Aristotelian structure and seed fields paradigm in relation to transmedia storytelling. She will be presenting over Zoom, and the second Zoom presentation from the second half of the day will come from art teacher Ivo Visak, which co-design. It's about co-design. And two last presentations will be again here. Minna Rädy about English language influences in Estonian advertising landscape, outdoor advertising case studies in 2020, and the fast one will be our doctoral student Michael Gerdo-Towson presenting interactivity and film dramaturgy work. And they will end with a second panel discussion. My question Do we have a Zoom presenter ready? Strange thing with this multi-technical environment is that I cannot see who is on a Zoom, and I would like to say hello to her. Tia, can you hear me? Silence is golden. We are ready to see your presentation. Any signs of life? Okay. See on selle tehnikasajandi võlud. Iialgi ei tea, mis juhtuma hakkab. Aga ettekande teema on väga asjakohane igale. Kommunikatsioon mitmekultuurilistes paarides.
Yes, hello. Finally, we had some technical issues, and I would like to start with my presentation.
Oh, nice. Now we can see.
Can you see this presentation?
Yes. Please put it on a full screen.
Yes, I'm doing it. Okay, so hello again. I am Tea Maria Mitse, and I'm here to present my thesis in a relationship with an Estonian communication of intercultural couples. So this study, just to briefly mention, is about 5 intercultural couples in which one is partner is an Estonian and the other one is a foreigner. The couples I researched are Latvian Estonian, Spanish Estonian, Mexican Estonian, Turkish Estonian, and Macedonian Estonian. And these couples all communicate in English and are located in Tallinn. And the motivation for this study was negative comments and feedback provided by my foreign friends and acquaintances regarding their romantic relationships with locals, Estonians. So most of the foreigners I have met in Estonia complained how hard it was to get into a romantic intercultural relationship with Estonians, and they shared their disappointment, so I decided to research this topic a little bit more. So first, let's define what is an intercultural couple. Such couples where each partner comes from a different country and they speak a different first language are called intercultural couples. Scholars claim that intercultural couples face different kind of challenges and they use different approaches to minimize their problems compared to the monocultural couples. And I had 3 research questions. So the first one was, what kind of cultural and linguistic challenges do partners in intercultural couples experience? Second, which communication strategies do intercultural couples develop in order to address cross-cultural differences? And the third one, what it is like. As for the theoretical framework, I will be short here. So I used a social identity theory by Turner and Tatchwell. And the main idea is that people usually favor their in-groups and criticize out-groups by undergoing 3 main stages. First, they categorize people into groups. The second one is like they identify themselves with the groups that are closest to them. And then they compare their in-groups to out-groups, mainly for the aim of criticism. Another theoretical theory I used is acculturation model by John Berry. And John Berry suggests that Cultural minorities and majorities use different strategies for acculturation. On the left, we see 4 acculturation strategies used by cultural minorities, and on the right, we see the strategies used by majorities. And a third culture building by Casimir. So third culture is the combination of some elements from both cultures in intercultural relationships. And feeling such a culture creates the feeling of mutuality, equal understanding, and appreciation of both intercultural partners. And forming third culture is the expression of couple identity in intercultural relationships, and it eliminates risks of ethnocentrism. As for the research methodology, so it's a qualitative study. I used inductive approach and phenomenological methodology. As for data collection, I used purposeful sampling and conducted semi-structured face-to-face interviews with 5 intercultural couples, as I mentioned already. Out of them, 2 are same-sex couples. I had total 10 study participants, aged 24 and 34, and I asked them over 21 open-ended questions. So first of all, I had to study cultural and linguistic backgrounds of the study participants before getting the answers to my research questions. So this research showed that all the couples are bi or multilinguals. They communicate in English with each other. They are settled in Tallinn. They have lived together at least a year, some even 5 years. They see intercultural relationships as more complicated than monocultural ones. And all of them believe that intercultural relationships are much more interesting and exciting than monocultural partnerships. So research question 1, what kind of cultural and linguistic challenges do partners in intercultural couples experience? So the top challenges named by all study participants were inability to properly express themselves in language to English, feeling like an outsider in the circle of family or friends of their partners due to cultural and linguistic barriers, and having challenges or misunderstandings with the partner due to culture-related differences. And research question 2, which strategies do intercultural couples develop in order to address cross-cultural differences? So all couples named this as top strategies they use in their everyday lives. So talking about everything. They said talk is essential too. Also merging two cultures, the same as third cultural building, which I mentioned, sharing similar interests, modifying behaviors mainly to better adapt to partner's culture, and using private language, which only the couples understand, and being open to other cultures. Now, in order to find the answer to my research question 3, what it is like to be in an intercultural relationship with an Estonian, first I had to somehow draw a general portrait of an Estonian person. So I used the info provided only by my study participants, who said that Estonians in general are shy, quiet, closed, not easy to approach, need more time to open up and adapt to changes. Other ones named were like they have huge personal space. And I also found that intercultural relationships have a great impact on the personalities of the partners, including Estonians. So majority of Estonian study participants said that after entering such a relationship, they have become more communicative, more talkative, more open to other cultures, more spontaneous and happier. So just to answer this third question, what it is like to be in an intercultural relationship with an Estonian, based only on the data provided by my study participants, it can be said that intercultural partnerships with Estonians can be happy, strong, and long-lasting. They are not hard to form, but may take some time, and they will work well if both partners respect each other's cultures, communicate their concerns, and share their interests. So the main conclusion was that both partners need to give a proper effort to make such kind of relationship work. And it's not only about one side Estonians. And to sum up, this research expands existing knowledge about intercultural relationships. It contributes to existing studies about the same-sex intercultural couples. And it is the first study about the Estonians in intercultural partnerships. And I would suggest directions for further studies as well. It's to conduct a larger scale similar study, investigate intercultural marriages, or conduct a diachronic study of the same couples, let's say after 5 or more years, and to research same-sex intercultural partnerships in Estonia, which has not been researched yet. So this is all from my side. I hope you liked the presentation. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you, Tea. As you don't have, unfortunately, time to stay in our panels, and we have opportunity right now to ask questions if our audience has, or if there are questions in YouTube chats, and it's also possible to ask the questions. I have the first one to you. What was the most, to say, exciting or surprising finding from your study?
Well, most surprising. I don't know. Most surprising was that all of this Estonian and non-Estonian study participants listed same traits of Estonians, and that all of them said that it's not about that one partner is Estonian, that both partners need to give it a proper effort to make intercultural relationships work. And also another finding was that Estonian and the other partners' cultures were extremely different, and these people had to even merge these two cultures to somehow find the middle ground. This was the most interesting finding for me, that all of them are merging their two cultures to somehow get along and make this relationship work.
Yeah, for me it was not surprised to find out that Estonians are quiet, but it was surprising to see that intercultural relationship makes us more happier. For a shy people, I am not so sure that I can share this opinion, but I haven't tested it yet. Sure. Maybe. I have one person who can comment. Alessandro, do you agree with the findings from this study? Okay. Okay.
Hi. Can you hear me now? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. No, so I was brought in the picture actually because I am in an intercultural relation. So I totally agree with your findings. It's like it's what I have experienced since I came to Estonia. So that's reassuring that I'm not the only one feeling certain things, but it's probably a pattern of intercultural couples.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, thank you. So we have find that yes, this study quite well reflects this real life. Thank you, Tea. Do you have any other questions? If somebody has, please, now it's time to ask. It seems that no. Then thank you once more, Tea. It was really interesting to see the presentation, and yeah. And we will move to our next presentation. We will continue on Zoom, and the presentation will be by ZF Dündar. It's our cross-media graduate. And her presentation will be an introduction how to create effective group environments in transmedia production. Hopefully ZF is ready. Hello, ZF. Okay, I hope to. I didn't hear your voice.
Yes, now it should be fine.
ZF, for introductions, a question. Where are you now?
I am in Italy right now.
In Italy?
Yes, for my internship.
How is life in Italy?
It's nice. It was a bit hectic. It's still hectic. Today, I have also some bureaucratic matters, bureaucratic things to do. But so far, it's very nice.
Nice to hear.
Although it's hectic, yeah.
Now, we are ready for your presentation. Screen is yours.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. Today, I will try to briefly talk about my thesis and how did I come up with the idea, or how did I feel in overall. So my thesis was on how to create effective group environments in transmedia production. During my whole research, I came up with some titles where I will also talk about today. So my thesis subject contains these titles. First of all, I would like to start to define what is a group environment. Especially in the creative groups, it gives the easier development process and with a stronger outcome, since there are different personality traits and backgrounds. Especially this is more possible in Tallinn University, since we have a lot of international people inside. And then I come up with viability. What viability means is, when we answer to this question, how much do I want to continue to work with my current team, it gives the viability. It is very much important in creative group environments because it doesn't only give the hint for future projects, but also it explains a lot what is the current situation inside the group now. And then the cohesion comes along. Cohesion means that when the group has a common goal or common motivation, it of course takes some time to be shaped, because it pretty much depends on the personalities inside of the group. It takes some time to open up themselves individually or also creativity-wise. And as I said, it's pretty much group-based, and it can be changeable group to group. And unfortunately, I come up with the conclusion that when the amount of members are lower, cohesion level is higher. And then the team climate comes. Team climate contains climate strength. What does it mean? Your climate strength inside the group can be either strong or weak. And it depends on how your group members respond to one problem. If the response is more common within the group, then it means that climate strength in that group is stronger. And this is the profitable one, because we wouldn't like to have another conflict within the group while we are trying to already solve a problem which is already exists. And team climate is all about establishing connections between individuals or creating concrete purpose into collective action. In this case, I find it pretty much similar to cohesion. What does it mean? Creating a purpose into collective action, in another word, it's establishing rules for a stable group dynamic. Because in the early stages of creative groups, it's very much important to know what is your vision and mission to do this project, so everybody will take their action accordingly. And characteristic of members, I believe that this was one of the most important parts, because group members' personalities is a big impact on group environment, and also it's a very decent source of conflicts. There are thousands of different characteristics in this world, but also in group environments, there are some core personalities. And I took one of the most important, which is micromanagement. Those people are, in my words, a bit danger for creativity, because they have lack of trust in group members and they cannot think outside of the box. And in my personal opinion, again, it's dangerous, especially for transmedia projects, because it can cause a flat structure within transmedia project where we won't have layers inside the project to reach different characteristic people or people who have different interests. And in my thesis, I came up with a couple of conclusions, which are, despite all the challenges that we faced with, I believe that it was still a successful project. And during these challenges, I realized the importance of management, empathy, understanding, and patience within the group. And then all these conclusions also led me somewhere maybe open-ended question, like maybe compulsory management courses was needed for us, because at the beginning or even during the process, we weren't aware so much what was going on, why those conflicts were raising. And I believe that if we would have known those things better, we would handle both conflicts and the projects better. So I want to continue with the title that, how did I come up with the idea? I think this is a very important part. Our Transmedia project's name was Sweet Issues. And during the process, we had to face with a lot of conflicts, confusion, and in the end, it led me to feel overwhelming. And I told myself, no, things are not seem right here, and there must be something that we do wrong or missing. So I want to search what is that missing part. And then the journey started. And first of all, I chose my supervisor. Maybe I should have chosen according to the subject, so it could have been a psychologist or someone who produced several transmedia productions with international people, but instead communication and connection was the key for me. So I wanted to choose someone that I felt comfortable with, and that comfortable feeling would encourage me to write a thesis, which I wasn't feeling so comfortable with, because it's not my cup of tea in the end. And then the research comes. I want to give one suggestion here, that do not get bored, because you will read many resources until finding the right one. I realized that the more that I read, the more I understood what was the core of my thesis, and in which other ways that my thesis can go. And then finally, the interviews. I suggest you to find out it will flourish your thesis. In my case, I also made interviews with my group mates, because this thesis could have been very much subjective. It still is, but by adding my group members' opinions, ideas, I try to make it more objective. And how did I feel overall? I think it was pretty much therapeutic journey for me, because I found out what's triggering me, what were the conflicts within me, but also for my creativity side or for my social side. And I'm pretty much happy that I am kind of leaving something for the next generation cross-media students. So if somehow, if they came across with my thesis, maybe they will know that where they should look at, where they should give their attention. So although I said it wasn't my cup of tea writing thesis, I pretty much enjoyed, and the results were very nice in my opinion. And thank you for your attention. If you have any further questions or interest about my thesis, you can reach me from my contact.
Thank you, Sedef. Thank you. It was an interesting journey. Sure. So, but we will meet with you in a panel. We have 3 presentations before we start panel discussion. The next one will be from here, Sandra Sander. Please. Now we will continue in Estonian presentations. Ja nüüd lähme edasi siis eestikeelsete 3 ettekandega. Esimene nendest on siis Sandra Sander, reklaami ja suhtekorralduse inglise keeles. Oh, sorry, good news for you. It will be in English. That's in kus on PowerPoint? Liia, kus PowerPoint? Kus on PowerPoint?
Okay, so good morning. I am Sandra Sander, and I will talk a little about my bachelor's work. Comparison of Estonian and American politicians' marketing communications on Facebook. The study also had an amazing supervisor, Professor Dawn Enniston. So, Wattenbergs found that 1/3 of voters do not actually know anything about particular politicians, despite having strong emotions towards them. Many people do not stop to investigate platforms. Politicians try to entice them by slogans, and it is suggested that today people vote with their hearts more than with their minds. It has been argued that through the concept of permanent campaign, political marketing has become the organizing principle around which parties and government policies are constructed. It is extremely likely that the values and attitudes modeled by the leader will be taken by voters to represent those of their party. Certain leaders are more popular than the policies they stand for. And also it is interesting to know that candidates who are perceived as worse or than much better than the majority of people are rejected by voters. The first are discarded for obvious reasons, and the latter because they are too different from every man. This is also why populists are doing so great. And okay. So, political marketing has been criticized from vertical standpoints as undermining democracy because of its ability to promote populism and people with right appearances and to manipulate and mislead the voter. It should be stressed that political marketing is not an ideology, and it is not related to a particular ideology more than it is to another. Political marketing may be used for various purposes and is not itself a threat to democracy. The real threat is the intention of people who decide to use it. One of the fundamental promotion strategies is the strategy of negating the campaigning, staging a direct or indirect comparative assault against the position of opponent and or their personal characteristics. But negative advertising should be used only as last resort because it might produce a backlash. Negative information is figural against a positive background, and people are more strongly motivated to avoid costs than to approach gains. Law also points out a mechanism of motivational explanation for negativity that is related to the survival of species. It is more adaptive to avoid life-threatening costs than to approach pleasurable gains. This way of appealing to voters has become one of the most frequently used marketing methods. Facebook is now the leading social media channel for both Estonia and for the US. It has arguably become the most powerful political messaging platform in history. Some voters know for a long time who they are going to vote for, and persuasion efforts will inevitably fail in their case. But there are also floating voters who make up their minds during the campaign or just before the act of voting. Because of their behavior is more impulsive than reasoned, it is relatively easy to convince them by particular arguments, but it is much more difficult to reach them because usually they are not interested in politics. Social media could be an effective way to reach voters who are usually not interested in politics. It is also interesting to point out that television viewers will be significantly more likely than audio listeners to use personality criteria when evaluating the candidates. Facebook Live and Facebook video viewers are significantly more likely to use personality criteria when evaluating the candidates than audio listeners or voters who read about the candidate. It could be thought that explaining complex subjects to voters through Facebook posts is shallow, but people use these quick narratives as shorthand devices for simplifying complex subjects. So the study examined the differences between Estonian and American politicians' use of Facebook messaging and their reactions to such messaging. The research approach used conceptual analysis to examine Facebook posts of two Estonian politicians, Kaja Kallas and Jürgen Ligi, and two prominent American politicians, Kamala Harris and Mike Pence. The posts what were examined were from a time period of 1st July from 2020 up to 30th September 2020. Posts were categorized as personal-oriented, competitive-oriented, and policy-oriented. And overall engagement was also recorded. In the competitive-oriented posts, the politician often directly refers to the opposing individual or political party. These posts may also emphasize the flaws and faults of their competition. Posts that use negative advertising are categorized as competitive-oriented posts. Policy-oriented posts where politicians talk about their political agendas or ideologies in policy or ideologies, yes. In personal-oriented posts, the politician talks about their own personal life. They may share photos from childhood, their families or hobbies, and the politician shows themselves as human to empathize with. Also, personal-oriented posts had much more photos and visuals than competitive and policy-oriented posts. So Kamala Harris had 20% of Kamala Harris posts were personal posts, 30% were competitive posts, and 50% of posts were policy posts. American politicians concentrate more on explaining their ideology or policy to their followers. Kamala Harris was fighting for elections. Since many people do not stop to investigate platforms, it could be possible that the smaller word count per one post from American politicians is linked to them focusing more on trying to communicate with voters through slogans. And in the 3-month period, Estonian politicians posted only 57% of amount of American politicians posted posts. This was one of the factors that was considered when looking at the engagement levels, and primary reason for selecting a percentage of posts. So top 15% of engaged posts were selected to see exactly the top engagements by reactions and the top engagements by comments. Instead of raw numbers, for example, top 10 posts or top 15 posts. The findings show that her competitive-oriented posts were much more popular to comment on between the followers. 36% of posts in the most engaged post by comments were policy-oriented, far less than her overall 50% of policy-oriented posts. Since people are more strongly motivated to avoid costs than to approach gains, it is not surprising that people commented most on competitive-oriented posts. People want to react and get the word in when something is threatening their well-being. Kamala Harris calling Donald Trump a narcissist who will destroy healthcare, which threatens voters' well-being. Even if a voter does not particularly wish to vote for Kamala Harris, they may choose a protest vote against Donald Trump. Estonian politicians Kaja Kallas and Jürgen Ligi posted 1.4 times more personal-oriented posts than American politicians Kamala Harris and Mike Pence. Estonian politicians seem to try to form more personal relationship with their voters. This could be due to Estonia having much smaller population. Thus, Estonian politicians have far less of population to reach, and forming more personal relationship with their voters is potentially more accessible. Since Kamala Harris and Mike Pence have millions and millions of followers, they can't really get this kind of personal relationship with their voters as easily. Estonian politicians Kaja Kallas and Jürgen Ligi also posted 2 times more competitive-oriented posts than American politicians Kamala Harris and Mike Pence. Appealing to voters with negative advertising has become one of the most frequently used marketing methods. It was also very interesting for me to see that Estonian politicians are much more competitive-oriented than American politicians. At first, I figured it would be otherwise. For Kaja Kallas, a whopping 77% of most engaged posts were personal-oriented. And in the top 5% most engaged posts by reactions were all personal-oriented. This finding shows what kind of posts Kaja Kallas followers like to engage with by reactions. Kaja Kallas' most engaged posts by comments were 62% competitive-oriented. Her competitive-oriented posts were much more popular for building a dialogue with followers. There was not one personal-oriented post in the most engaged post by comments, so people don't really start a dialogue about personal topics. In the most engaged posts by reactions, 12 posts out of 13 posts had picture with a post. So personal posts are really more popular if you give them a visual, and people can emphasize more with a visual than with a text. So Jürgen Ligi composed several very long posts on Facebook. The word count for a single post from Jürgen Ligi could be equal to 3, 4, or even 10 posts from other politicians. Estonian politicians Kaja Kallas and Jürgen Ligi posted 1.8 times less policy-oriented posts than American politicians Kamala Harris and Mike Pence. For Jürgen Ligi, the most engaged posts by reactions were personal-oriented, equating to 83.3% of posts. Most engaged posts by comments for Jürgen Ligi in this case were policy-oriented, equating for 42% of posts. Jürgen Ligi's followers were more prone to comment on policy-oriented posts. Mike Pence at the time was defending his role as vice president. Mike Pence was serving under Donald Trump, who is recognized as being very competitive-oriented. Mike Pence could have intentionally decided that his political role as vice president requires him to complement rather than reinforce the president. Mike Pence could be attempting to use his more policy-oriented communications by diluting Donald Trump's aggressive competitive-oriented communications. Negative campaigning often leads to slightly lower feelings of political efficiency, trust in government, and possibly overall public mood. Thus, Mike Pence was working to ensure that the public would not lose its trust in the government. Using negative advertising is also not recommended for representatives of parties enjoying little support in society or those for which support is decreasing. And since the corona pandemic and many other issues, Donald Trump and Mike Pence were losing their popularity. So being extra competitive on top of that is not recommended. For Mike Pence, the most engaged posts by reactions were personal-oriented, which equated to 47% of posts. The most engaged posts by comments, or 84% of posts, were policy-oriented, compared to 71% of overall posts being policy-oriented. In the most engaged posts by reactions, 18 posts out of 19 posts as pictures were post. Visual images help politicians to brand themselves in a non-verbal way. This can be utilized to get more engagement, especially with personal-oriented posts. Pictures can show politicians' personality in a much intimate and effective way. So overall, Estonian politicians used more text, but post much less frequently than American politicians. Estonian politicians' posts were much more personal-oriented and more competitive-oriented, but they used less policy-oriented posts. American politicians seem to communicate more in a slogan-like manner. And engagement by comments was increased more for Estonian politicians than American politicians for competitive-oriented posts. Engagement by reactions was decreased more for Estonian politicians than American politicians for policy-oriented posts. So could say that Estonian voters are not so interested in policy, more in personal and competitive posts and communication. The research also found that the most engaged posts by reactions typically included an image, not a link, whereas the most engaged posts by comments typically also had a link attached to the post that had extra information, extra topics to discuss about in the comment section. And thank you for your attention.
Yeah, thank you. We will continue with the next presentation, which will be delivered over Zoom. Is Elina ready?
Hello.
Hello, Elina. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Just a second, Elsie.
In which country you are?
I'm in Latvia.
How is
Not so far.
How is life in Latvia?
It's good, it's fine. I guess that around the same as in Estonia, not so far away.
Nice to hear. Now the screen is yours. You can start your presentation with screen sharing.
Yes, can you see it? All right. So today I will tell you about my master's thesis, which was keeping national identity in the age of globalization and practices among Latvian young adults living abroad. And to start off, I think the first thing for me was to define my own aim before I could start to look into the research aims. So since in my bachelor studies, I had a topic for my thesis that I actually did not enjoy and did not understand, I think it was important for me to find something that I would actually enjoy. And this idea, looking into national identity, came to me during one of the courses where we had to pick a topic for our term papers. And we had some discussion, and I mentioned something about national identity. And then Professor Zabrotskaya, she picked up on my idea and said, that's a very good idea. Why don't you look into that? And actually, after doing my term paper on this national identity, I understood that that's something that I would like to focus my master's thesis research as well. And that is one tip I can give for everybody. When you pick a topic, pick something that you actually enjoy, pick something that you want to research and that you want to find answers to. Because for me, I think it was
really easy to work and to read and to analyze all the data, because I wanted to find out actually what are the results, what are the answers to my research questions. So my research had two goals. The first one was how the national identity is nurtured among Latvian young adults living abroad. And the second was a little bit focused more on the media consumption, since that also is an important part of how this national identity can be maintained or strengthened when living abroad. And in my theoretical background, I looked into several concepts. The first was identity itself, culture, language, which includes also cultural identity and linguistic identity. Then, of course, national identity, globalization, and media. And what is interesting that I found there were several authors who had different ideas. One group said that national identity is actually more stronger in this globalization age, where we are exposed to more different cultures and people, that we keep it stronger. And others said that no, actually, since it is exposed to more different cultures and identities, it actually is threatened. And then I looked also in how the Latvia policy is for keeping and strengthening national identity, and also their goals in the media area. And I found out actually that in Latvia, they do not really focus on social media. They do not focus on younger generation as itself, because their main goal for the media communication with the Latvians living abroad was some radio program. And then, yes, social identity theory and cultural hybridization theories that looked into how we keep in touch and how cultures mix when exposed to each other. And now my methodology part, I had semi-structured interviews, and they were also based on the theoretical points that I just discussed. I had quite lengthy interviews, and what I can mention here as a tip is that make sure that you always save all the recordings, that you can transcribe them and actually use. Besides these video interviews, I also had the observation, which could be called a little bit as an artificial observation, because I asked my participants to just prepare some items that they would have kept or they have taken abroad with them from Latvia that have some significance, and they were free to choose anything that symbolizes Latvia for them. And my participants were 8 Latvian young adults, aged 19 to 29. And they were living in Estonia, Denmark, Ireland, and the Netherlands. I had 2 participants in each of the countries. And now if we move on to the results and my research questions. So my first research question was, what are the Latvian young adults' cultural, linguistic, and social practices in keeping their national identity? And I found out that most of them kept the traditions alive, which included celebrations such as Līgo celebration. They also kept on their hobbies. Some of them joined Latvian dance groups abroad. And they also cooked traditional meals and some other family recipes, and that was important for them, this coming together through food, and also believing in Latvian superstitions, which is also quite a funny story, where in Latvia we have this superstition that you're not supposed to stand in crosswinds, and if you stand in crosswinds, you'll get sick. And there was one of the participants shared a story from a party where there were 2 Latvians and other foreign people, and only 2 Latvians got sick because there were crosswinds and nobody else got sick. Then the linguistic practices. In everyday life, of course, Latvians who live abroad, they spoke English mostly. And even though they lived with other Latvians or contacted their families back home, they felt bad that they are losing Latvian language skills. And it seemed that they are letting go of their linguistic identity. And social practices, as I mentioned, yes, they preferred living and spending time with other Latvians instead of local people, for example. And they felt more Latvian among other foreigners. So they had the experience to share Latvian traditions, culture, share the foods, and so on. What was interesting is that they were not really connected to other diaspora Latvians, meaning that they spent their time together with friends, people who they already knew, or people from, for example, universities that were their age. And yes, the main difference with the older Latvians were that they had their own older diaspora groups maybe and different interests. So it was not interesting for young adults. And also another thing is that they visited Latvia quite often, at least once in 3 months. But keep in mind, this was before the pandemic hit. So right now, this point might be a little bit different when they were not able to actually go back home. Then my second research question focused on their plans, staying abroad or coming back to Latvia. And what I found interesting is that regardless their plans, their national identity was still kept strong. And it wasn't that the Latvians who had decided to stay abroad, maybe for a longer period of time after the studies, or they had just moved to work, they still had strong national identity and they did not adapt to the new culture quicker than those who planned on going back home. And my third research question was about the media use, how these media use habits correspond to keeping national identity. And interestingly, yes, they, as young people tend to do, they did not really use this traditional media. They didn't watch news, or even they didn't read online news portals. They had this confidence that important news will reach them, that either their parents or their friends in Latvia or friends abroad will share this information with them if there's something happening, or that they will just find it on social media, on Facebook. And one thing that they used was Facebook groups, because that was a good way to reach other Latvians living abroad, and they got important information there. And then again, also, they watched Latvian movies or TV series that kept them connected, also not only with this culture or media, but also the language, because watching movies and series in Latvian language, they mentioned as important to them to keep the language alive as well. And in conclusions, I can say that overall, my study found that national identity was not really impacted by globalization, and it was kept strong through many different practices, cultural, linguistic, and social. And social media and entertainment was the main sources of information for them, and they also helped in strengthening the national identity. And here I can also mention this role of the government, since they should actually reconsider adding social media and entertainment in their plan of keeping the national identity or strengthening the connection with diaspora members, because the radio programs that they have in their list was actually not even heard of by these young adults. And this study also provides insight into the new diaspora practices, because the previous studies were done with the Latvians who live abroad since 1990s. And of course, it is a different generation and they have different connection to Latvia and to other Latvians abroad. And for the future research, I could suggest expanding the respondent pool, of course, and also conducting the research in Latvian language. In this case, of course, my questions were in Latvian to these young adults because of their linguistic identity as being Latvian language, their native language. And of course, now after the pandemic and the borders being closed and different limitations in coming back home and being in touch with Latvia, I think the results could also be different. So that is worth researching. And yes, that is it from me. Thank you.
Thank you. Really interesting presentation again. We will have time for questions in the panel, but before entering into the panel, we will have the last presentation for the first session, and it will be by Emily Polberg. And this will be in Estonian, yes? Ja järgmine ettekanne on siis Emily Polbergilt ja pärast seda siis kõigi kõnelejatega paneelarutelu.
Tere, mina olen Emily Polberg, ma räägin enda bakalaureusetööst digitaalse ajakirjandusliku sisu eest tasumist mõjutavad tegurid. Nagu eelmine ettekanne siis ka rääkis natukene, et ma valisin enda jaoks nagu huvipakkuva teema ja see, ma arvan, aitas mind kõige rohkem nagu hoida motiveerituna. Minu esimeseks uurimisküsimuseks oli siis, millised tegurid mõjutavad veebimeedia kasutajaid digitaalse sisu eest tasumisel. See on praegu, ma kujutan ette, üks olulisemaid küsimusi, mis meediatööstust mõjutab, sellepärast et kasum soovitakse siis ikkagi teenida peamiselt läbi tellimuspõhise ärimudeli ja seda siis lugejate regulaarsete veebitellimuste pealt. Lisaks uurisin, kas ja millisel määral mõjutab ajakirjanduse tunnetuslik usaldusväärsus lugejate otsust veebisisu eest tasumisel ja seda pidasin oluliseks uurida sellepärast, et see usaldusväärsuse küsimus on aina aktuaalsemaks tõusnud ja seda ajakirjanduse usaldusväärsust nagu seatakse aina rohkem küsimärgi alla ja ma leian, et ülejäänusid väga mitmeid ostuotsust mõjutavaid tegureid on varem ka väga põhjalikult uuritud, erinevaid digitaalsete vahendite kasutuseeliseid ja maksevahendite eeliseid või makseviisida. Ja lisaks uurisin siis, kuivõrd usaldusväärse infoallikana tunnetavad lugejad trükiajakirjandust võrreldes veebimeediaga. Ma eeldasin, et trükiajakirjandust seatakse võib-olla natuke usaldusväärsemaks, et äkki see võiks olla üheks eeliseks veebimeedia ees. Ja kõigepealt panin paika siis teoreetilised lähtekohad, uurisin meedia ärimudeleid ja maksumüüre peamiselt, kuna minu töö siis keskenduski ärimudelile, mille kaudu soovitakse tulu teenida eelkõige auditooriumilt. Mis siis omakorda tähendab seda, et kas siis kogu ajakirjanduslik sisu või vähemalt osa sellest on eraldatud maksumüüriga. Tööle lähenesin siis kombineeritud uurimismeetodi läbi ja ma tegin standardiseeritud küsitluse, mille ma sain 270 vastust. Küsitlus koosnes 34 küsimusest vastavalt siis sellele, milliseid vastuseid küsimusele vastaja andis. Ja siis mul oli pool struktureeritud intervjuud, viisin läbi 10 intervjuud. Intervjuude lõpus küsisin siis intervjueeritavatelt mitmete artiklite kohta, et kas nad oleksid nõus selle eest tasuma ja mis põhjusel. Töö tulemustest selgus siis, et ostuotsust soodustavad peamiselt järgnevad tegurid: vajadus kvaliteetse teabe järele, reklaamivaba veebikeskkond, digipaketi soodne hind ja digitaalse sisu eksklusiivsus ja värskus. Selgus intervjuudest, et üks kõige olulisemaid tunnuseid on see eksklusiivsus ja värskus, ehk et lugejad peavad tunnetama, et sellele sisule nad ei saa kuskilt mujalt ligi ega ei pääse sellele kuskilt tasuta allikatest ligi. Siin on ka siis jooniselt näha, et seda mahukat ja kvaliteetset sisu peetakse hästi oluliseks ja eksklusiivsust ja mahukat ja kvaliteetset sisu hinnatakse just siis tasulise uudise puhul väga oluliseks. Ja pärsivad ostuotsust peamiselt siis teabe kättesaadavust tasuta allikatest ja varasemad negatiivsed kogemused, ehk et kui lugeja on varem mingi artikli eest tasunud ja tunnetanud, et see ei ole olnud seda tasu väärt, kas siis selle mahukuse tõttu või kvaliteetsuse tõttu ja liiga sisukad pealkirjad on ka üheks pärssivaks teguriks, et inimene tunnetab, et selle kogu artikli sisu tuleb juba pealkirjast välja ning artikkel ise ei paku enam lisaväärtust, mille eest siis tasuda. Teisalt aga liiga lühikesed või ekslikud pealkirjad võivad inimesi eemale peletada, kuna need tunduvad ebausaldusväärsed. Ja selgus, et meedia tunnetuslik usaldusväärsus on siis üheks väga oluliseks teguriks, mis puudutab meedia sisu eest tasumist, sest et lugejad ei ole valmis tasuma digiplatvormide sisu eest, mille uudiste tõesuses nad on varem kahelnud, aga teisalt juba nagu sooritatud nendest digipakettidest loobuma ei kiputa, et digipakett ikkagi tühistatakse vaid juhul, kui kahtlase sisuga uudised muutuks nagu igapäevaseks nähtuseks. Ja viimasele uurimisküsimusele siis ehk, et kuivõrd usaldusväärsena tunnetavad lugejad veebiajakirjandust võrreldes trükiajakirjandusega selget või ühtset järeldust ei selgunud, kuna lihtsalt küsimustikule vastajad ei ole enda jaoks seda lahti mõtestanud, et väga huvitav oli näha, kuidas küsimustikus ma küsisin kuskil 4 erinevas etapis tegelikult põhimõtteliselt sama küsimust teise sõnastuse või teiste valikuvariantidega veidi ja selgus, et igale küsimusele tulid väga erinevad vastused, ehk et inimesed ei ole sellist formaadipõhist usaldusväärsust enda jaoks lahti mõtestanud, mis oli minu jaoks väga üllatav, kuna tihti heidetakse veebimeedia usaldusväärsusel ette vigu näiteks väikeseid kirjavigu või pealkirjade vigu või sellist klikitavust ehk et clickbaiti, aga need on kõik tunnused, mis üldiselt siis trükiajakirjanduses puuduvad, aga see siiski seda usaldusväärsust lugejate silmis nagu ei tõsta. Ja üheks minu bakalaureusetöö üheks tugevaks küljeks minu hinnangul oli see, et ma sain meediaettevõtetele teha väga selgeid ja konkreetseid soovitusi, et selgus siis, et meediaettevõtted peaksid eksklusiivse sisu tootmisele rohkem rõhku panema ja tootma originaalseid sisu, sealhulgas siis olemuslugusid ja intervjuusid, kuna inimesed on suurema tõenäosusega nende eest valmis maksma, ja siis meelelahutusuudiste osakaalu tuleks vähendada või siis meelelahutusuudised paremini teistest uudistest eraldada. Ja minu tööd võib siis väga erinevalt edasi viia, et digitellimuste kasvu saab vaadata ka pandeemia kontekstis. Mina alustasin enda bakatöö kirjutamist võib-olla novembris, kus tegelikult puudus teoreetiline käsitlus selle kohta, nii et mina ei saanud väga palju seda pandeemiat enda töö tulemustes tõlgendada, aga kindlasti seda praegu juba saaks rohkem arvesse võtta ja lugemisharjumusi analüüsidest saaks siis välja selgitada, et kas teatud liiki teab, et tarbimine mõjutab üleüldise meedia usaldusväärsuse tajumist, et kas näiteks meelelahutusuudiseid lugev auditoorium tajub üleüldiselt meediat natuke ebausaldusväärsemalt. Lisaks saab siis meedia usaldusväärsuse tajumist vaadata poliitilisest aspektist, ehk et vaadata, millist poliitiliste seisukohtadega inimesed siis, kuidas nad erinevalt meedia usaldusväärsust tajuvad. Ja lisaks saab vaadata muidugi sotsiaaldemograafiliste näitajate kontekstis, et mina seda enda töös arvesse ei võtnud. Aitäh, kui teil on mingeid küsimusi, siis ma hea meelega võin vastata.
Jaa, nüüd on hea, aitäh. Aga aitäh, thank you all the panelists, aga paluks nüüd ettekandjad siia ettepoole, et meil on võimalus nüüd teha diskussiooniring. Paluks Sandra ka. Teie mikrofon on nii. Jah, ja ma küsin mõned küsimused arutada. So now we can continue with the panel discussion. Do we have our Zoom presenters present? Can you put Zoom on a big screen so we could see them? Hello once again. Now we have seen a 5 best introduction of final theses of BFM students, and we have 4 presenters here. Sedef, Tea, Tea, we don't have Sedef, Sandra, Elina, and Emily are here. Move the microphone in this way so we can have a look on. My first question is, actually, I'm pretty sure that you are happy with your thesis. You get the A grade, all of you, and you are graduated. But the first question is, what was the best or the most important learning you could share with our students, which will defend soon? Starting from Zedef, you are on screen maybe.
What was the most valuable outcome, you said? I think for me, I keep repeating this thing, which is that I thought that I couldn't write thesis because I don't enjoy read academical articles or write something more or less academical. But since I push my limits, I see that I am actually capable of reading, understanding, and even come up with my own ideas. It gave me a true satisfaction about myself, because when I see the result of my thesis, I said, okay, like I created it. There are many of my own thoughts, and that was pretty much satisfying. So if they have doubts about themselves, maybe they just keep pushing. They need to just keep pushing, and this way or that way, the outcome will be nice for them, I believe.
Thank you. Maybe now, Elina, what is your opinion?
Yes. Well, for me, as I mentioned before, is the topic, because I had a topic that I enjoyed and I wanted to find out the results. And also the fact that I was a young adult living abroad, and sometimes I felt maybe I'm alone with my feelings and the way I have been doing things. And then I talked to others and they share the same or very similar experiences. And I think that also when you pick your topics, what to write about, if you choose something that you can connect yourself or your professional interests or your academic interests, you will benefit. Not only it will be easier to write, but you will be happy that you found out something and that you achieved something and that you can help others who feel similarly, and you can share this insight that what you have found out.
Thank you. And now from here, Sandra, what is your advice to the new students?
Talk to different...
Microphone, please. No.
Okay. So help is good. Help is important. My supervisor was incredibly helpful and gave me much awesome articles to read, and also the topic has to be interesting for you. You do not want to put so much time and effort to a thing that you're not interested to. And also I asked people who are not my supervisors for different books and articles and everything. And for example, Laura Pink gave me an amazing book what helped me to get the whole work together and to connect all the different points. So yeah, help is good. Take help.
And Emily?
Ma ütleks, et jah, see teema huvi selle teema vastu on väga oluline, aga võib-olla ka see, et hoida ennast nagu stabiilses töörütmis, et minu jaoks oli see, et kui mul oli teoreetiline osa kirjutatud, siis mul jäi nagu väike paus järgmise etapi vahele, kus oli siis see küsimustiku koostamine, ja siis uuesti kuidagi tulla sinna töörütmi on palju raskem, kui seda töörütmi hoida lihtsalt jätkuvalt.
Jätkan siit küsimusega. I will continue from the question. What was the hard point in the road? Emily said that there was a point where there was this kind of eruption in the working process. What for others? Did you have some kind of points that the world looks pretty dark and disaster is close to you? Did you have this kind of down moments?
I think for me the hardest part was coming up with the titles of my thesis. But as I said in my presentation, the more I read, the more I had an understanding with what other ways I can come up with my thesis. But at some point I thought that, okay, I have an idea, like I have vague topic, but how I will come up with subtitles, I felt pretty much insecure. And I thought that, okay, I have a very good topic, but would I be actually able to write and finish all the thesis? So I think coming up with the titles was the hardest part for me.
Sandra, kas sul oli sellist? Did you have this kind of down moment?
Yes, well, it was Corona pandemic, so sitting between four walls from morning to evening, every day, day in, day out, really kills your motivation to do anything. When at the autumn, I was very interested about the topic and really wanted to do something with it. For a few months in between, I didn't do anything because the Corona pandemic really just gets you that down. Start jogging if it's Corona pandemic, go outside, that helps.
And Elina?
Well, for me, I think maybe in the middle of this whole writing process, I actually realized how much writing there is. And I also had these moments where I couldn't write anything, and I felt like I could not add anything else there, and I felt stuck. And then what else? Yes, of course, going out helped, and just reading some other materials or just taking a day off. And it is sometimes also when you see that deadlines are approaching and you feel like you have to work all day to just get it done, but taking a break and just not thinking about it for some time also help to just get back next day and start again when you feel you're stuck and there's nothing else you can think of.
Thank you. I have heard sometimes that it's really difficult to define the research question or even the right title for a thesis in the beginning. And some students have came up with ideas that I will do the research first and I will see what are the findings and then I will find the theory, and if everything is written down then I will word my title of the thesis. How you comment on this? What will be your advice to these students to start from the end? Elina, maybe.
Well, I guess it's possible, but you should have some idea of what theories you need to use, and maybe formulating the research questions, they should be done before you do the whole research, because that's the guideline. And I think you can always ask help to your supervisor or other professors or maybe even course mates that can give you some ideas how to better formulate them for yourself. Because if you just do the research without having any background, it might, at the end, you might find out that nothing matches together and you can't do anything with the results you have gotten.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's a really fascinating topic, and sometimes it seems that people know already, or they believe that they know what is the answer. Then they formulate the question and then try to find the right methodology to say that yes, the answer is correct, but this shouldn't be the way academic process goes on. Sandra, you had a different style of working actually. Your supervisor was, and your topic was quite international one. What is your experience? Do you encourage people to take this road, not to have only local look, or?
Yes, I do, because it actually helps to see a bigger picture, to see how it's done elsewhere and what could be maybe useful in our little Estonia here. So it's, and also you will work through materials that are cited by more people, potentially, if you're reading in English and or in more international level. So. And it's interesting, so I do recommend that.
Question to Emily, actually. Your thesis is the most closer to my research topic. And how you feel that do these media companies actually use your findings and conclusions? Do they believe in you or trust in you?
Ma arvan, et nad usaldavad küll ja tegelikult on teada, need asjad on tegelikult väga paljudele meediatööstustele, toimetustele ikkagi teada, aga ma arvan, et neid ei kasutata piisavalt ja kindlasti saaks neid põhimõtteid nagu rohkem kasutada igapäevases töös.
Just a short translation that yes, she trusts in the findings and actually she believes that media companies actually know what are these secrets, but they should trust more in a research and to use these findings. From here comes my next question to all of you. Do you feel that your theses do they have some real practical value? Is it just academic journey, or what kind of answer could be on the question, so what? Maybe, Elina, you are on our screen. Maybe you can start from there.
Yes. Well, the first is that young adult Latvians who live abroad could get the insight that they're not alone and others feel the same. But also, if we talk about these media use practices, then, of course, as I said, I researched this government's plan for keeping the national identity and strengthening the connection with diaspora Latvians. And what I found out in my study was that they did not use any traditional media. And the main point for the government's idea how to reach Latvians living abroad was through traditional media, through the radio. So they could see from my research that there are also other ways of reaching Latvians, and if they want to keep this connection as a government with the Latvians abroad, they should take a look into different means of communication and how to reach them better, rather than just saying traditional media is the only way to connect.
Makes sense, yes. Sedef, what about you?
Yes, I am actually talking about it also in my thesis, where I say that maybe there should be some management courses on how to maintain creative groups. And I also agree with Elina, if someone would read my thesis, coming from the same project experience, maybe they would feel less alone. And maybe it will lead people to search more about what I'm talking about my thesis, so they will handle conflicts within the group better. So I believe that it's quite, I'm also giving quite practical manners to students or to other people who are interested in doing creative work with other people.
Emily already answered this question. Sandra, please.
Yes, my research maybe shows more how to get the audience engaged in discussions, and how to get engagement more from also reactions. And also, since politicians are representative of people living there, maybe how American diplomats, politicians, whoever could engage Estonian people, and vice versa, how Estonian politicians could actually engage, could communicate with Americans.
Yeah, that's your thesis is also very, very interesting actually, and comparison of Kallas and Harris, and also taking Jürgen Ligi on board. It's a very colorful person actually, and your findings underlines the importance actually in the communication. And I'm not sure that Jürgen Ligi is happy with his personal approach and not having been considered as a politician, but it's more like a, how you put it politely, some entertainer, something like this. So, but now we have also some people here who would like to ask a question. I'm sorry about missing one question on YouTube. It was caused to the delay between the YouTube feed, and it is about 20 seconds. So if you have some question, you please raise your hand, or if somebody's listening on over YouTube, then of course, please write your question into the chat, and I'll try to wait and not to hurry with the questions. Moment of silence. Let's give the YouTube also the time to deliver. Are you writing, guys, up there? No. Okay, then it seems that we don't have any question from the audience right now. Thank you all the panelists. It was really interesting, and good luck in a future. I believe that you are in the beginning of a very good journey, or continuing a very, very good journey. Thank you, and let's give a hand to all the panelists. Now we will have a little break, and we will continue in roughly 30 minutes, and the next session starts 12:15 with presentation by Kadi Voosel. So please come back in 12:15 ja me jätkame siis 12:01.
Sah. 1, 2, 1, 2. Üks, kaks. Vaata siis pärast programmist ka, eks ju. 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 1. 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 1. 1, 2, 1, 2. 2, 1. 1, 2. Nad võivad niimoodi ka rääkida, vaata. Hästi kaugel nad räägivad. Nad võivad niimoodi. 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. Ja 1, 2 räägin teise. Nii. Ei jäta, see ei... 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 1, 1, 2, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. Kas ma räägin veel? Niimoodi on muidugi väga... Ei, no tegelikult on, mul on lihtne niimoodi rääkida, aga no ma kuulen ennast lihtsalt nagu... Ma olen nagu mullis. Räägin teise ka või? Kõlaga juurde tulen, hakkan vilisema, eks ju. Aga ta tagatavasti räägib siin taga. Siin ei tohiks viliseda. 1 ja 2 ja 3 ja 4. No vist on okei, kui ma panen selle nagu statsionaari paika. Jah.
üks. üks. 1.
Jah, tehnikaga on nii, et kui sisse lülitada, siis töötab mõnikord paremini. Aga mitte alati. Uus katse. Jätkame siis meie akadeemilise popi minikonverentsiga ja meil on ees ootamas siis teine paneel, kus on ettekandele tulemas 6 ülevaadet meie üliõpilaste poolt tehtud parimatest lõputöödest. Ja päeva alustame siis eestikeelse ülevaatega Kadi Vooselilt, muusikaõpetajalt, tema magistritöö. We will continue our session. First panel will be in, first presentation in this panel will be in Estonian language. Hope you will learn it soon. Nüüd palun, Kadi Voosel. Ekraan ja arvuti on nüüd teie.
Tere, head kuulajad! Minu nimi on Kadi Voosel ja annan teile siis täna ülevaate oma magistritöö kirjutamise protsessist. Tahaks panna edasi. Sain aru. Kõigepealt enda tausta kohta ütlen lühidalt, et olen lõpetanud muusikapedagoogika bakalaureuse ja muusikaõpetaja magistri eriala ja töötan täiskohaga Tallinna üldhariduskoolis muusikaõpetajana 6. aastat. Ja siit tulenevalt on ka minu magistritöö teema siis kasvanud välja minu eriala valikust ja töökogemusest lähtuvalt. Teema valikul lähtusin ma ideest, kuidas Eesti kontekstis on täheldatud, et muusikatund ei avalda väga suurt mõju õpilaste muusika kuulamise harjumuste kujunemisele ning samas muutuv õpikäsitlus tähtsustab just informaalse keskkonna kaasamist õppetöö osana ning digitehnoloogiast ei saa me üle ega ümber enam üheski valdkonnas. Seega sai minu töö eesmärgiks kaardistada hetkeolukorda ja võtta vaatluse alla 13–16-aastased noored. Minu töö kirjutamise protsess on kuvatud käesoleval leheküljel ja siinkohal võin öelda, et tegemist on üsna klassikalise ülesehitusega, mille puhul siis esimese sammuna tutvusin teoreetiliste aluste ja eelnevate uurimustega ning seejärel lähtuvalt sellest koostasin oma uurimuse läbiviimiseks kindla tegevuskava ja plaani. Viimaseks etapiks sai kokkuvõtte järelduste tegemine ning ettepanekute sõnastamine, mille raames sain ma teha soovitusi muusikaõpetuse valdkonnas, et toetada tulemuslikumalt kuulamisharjumuste kujunemist. Järgnevalt annan ülevaatlikult tutvustava ülevaate oma töö sisust. Töö teoreetilises osas kirjutasin muusika kuulamise tegevusest ja muusika kuulamise tehnilistest võimalustest, kuidas need on läbi ajaloo arenenud ja kuidas näiteks voogedastusplatvormid hetkel mõjutavad siis kuulaja kogemust ja kuulaja siis rolli muusika kuulamise harjumuse puhul. Lisaks andsin ülevaate muusika kuulamise rollist noorte elus ja mõjuteguritest muusika kuulamise harjumuste kujunemisel. Ja need mõjutegurid jaotasin 3 alakategooriasse: psühholoogilised, sotsiaalsed ja digitehnoloogia mõjutegurid. Empiirilises osas uuringu viisin läbi anonüümse ankeetküsitlusega. Uuringus osales kokku 210 õpilast vanuses 13–16. Ja uurimistöö tulemuste põhjal saan öelda, et muusika kuulamine on noorte hulgas väga populaarne ja 80% vastajatest kuulavad muusikat iga päev. Ja valdavalt kasutatakse siis voogedastusplatvorme YouTube ja Spotify. Psühholoogiliste tegurite osas võib öelda, et kõige rohkem lähtuvad õpilased oma muusika kuulamise valikutes oma tunnetest ja hetkeemotsioonist. Nende jaoks on oluline, et muusika sobiks kokku nende hetkeemotsiooniga ja samas kasutavad nad ka muusikat, et oma emotsioone siis või tuju muuta. Sotsiaalsete mõjutegurite osas võin ma oma uuringu põhjal öelda, et muusika kuulamisega seonduv tegevus on eelkõige individuaalne ja sotsiaalses muusika kuulamises on esikohal muusika kuulamine teise tegevuse taustana. Ehk siis kui õpilased kuulavad muusikat koos oma sõpradega, siis on see pigem kuulamiseks taustaks teisele tegevusele, aga infootsing ja üleüldse uue muusika avastamine käib üldiselt üksinda, kasutades siis interneti abi. Ja digitehnoloogia mõju võib täheldada selles osas, et voogedastust kasutatakse väga aktiivselt. Märkimisväärne on ka tasulise voogedastuse kasutamine ja õpilased koostavad siis ise esitusloendeid, et oma muusikat rohkem siis kategoriseerida ja samas võib-olla siin tuleb ka esile see, et miks muusika kuulamine on üldiselt individuaalne tegevus, kuna voogedastus ka juba edastab siis õpilastele nende kuulamisharjumustele sobivat muusikat, seega nad võib-olla ei pea enam vajalikuks, et nad peaksid sõpradega siis muusikateemadel arutlema. Parimad õppetunnid, mis ma sain selle töö kirjutamise jooksul, on kindlasti akadeemilise kirjandusega tutvumine, et kui põhjalik, kui sisukas, kui analüütiline on teaduslik kirjandus ja kuidas ma ise oskan paremini märgata seoseid enda ümber ja mõelda palju laiemalt sel teemal, mida ma siis uurisin. Siis kindlasti see teadusmaailma suurus ja laius, et kui palju on oma eriala valdkonnas teemasid, mida oleks kasulik uurida, märgata, arendada. Et see kindlasti pani mind ka paremini mõistma, mis on üldse uurimistöö olemus. Samamoodi siis iseenda töö läbi mõtestatus ja selline esimene teadusmaailma praktiline kogemus, et kuidas siis koostada töö, mis tõesti vastab ka nendele nõuetele. Ja teema põhjalik analüüs iseenda jaoks on kindlasti tulevikus oma erialatöös väga-väga kasulik. Ja mul on hea meel, et ma saan oma töös lähtuvalt teha siis ettepanekuid ka muusikaõpetuse aine läbiviimisel, näiteks et võtta voogedastusplatvormid kasutusele siis ka ainetundides, et see jääks ainult õpilaste vaba aja tegevuseks, samamoodi teadlikult analüüsida nende kuulamisharjumusi, et millal kuulata muusikat taustaks, millal kuulata seda päriselt nii, et sa ka suudad seda analüüsida, võib-olla rohkem lähtuda ka tunnetest, mis muusika kuulamine tekitab õpilastes ja alati võib-olla mitte võtta esimese valikuna siis muusika sellist analüüsimist vormipõhiselt, vaid just analüüsida ka siis emotsioone, et miks mõni muusika just selliseid emotsioone tekitab. Ning samamoodi kindlasti Eesti muusika osakaalu suurendamine, kuna minu uuringu tulemusena selgus, et välismaa artistide muusika kuulamine on suures osas ülekaalus, et siis kindlasti muusikatunni üks osa võiks olla Eesti muusika tutvustamine, kuigi Eesti muusika voogedastuses on juba eraldi küsimus, et kas on seda seal piisavalt palju või siiski ei ole. Tooksin välja ka kõige raskemad kohad, mis on võib-olla õpetuseks ja soovituseks tudengitele, kes hetkel hakkavad kirjutama või on kirjutamas oma lõputöid. Et esimene asi, kirjanduse läbitöötamise ajamahukus, et kui luua oma teoreetilist alust, siis see kirjanduse läbitöötamine, kus on pidevalt viited erinevatele autoritele, allikatele, see kõik on väga põnev, aga kui sa jääd sellesse lõputusse ringi, et sa kogu aeg leiad uut huvitavat informatsiooni oma teema kohta, siis võib aeg päris kiiresti kuluda. Ja see viib mind ka selle teise punkti juurde, et teemas püsimine, et sa pead olema oma teema raames, aga samas piisavalt laiahaardeline, et need on juba praegu sellised vastandid ja seetõttu on päris keeruline oma sõnastusega tööd kokku kirjutada nii, et ta vastaks kõikidele kriteeriumitele. Et selle jaoks ma soovitan väga palju varuda just aega. Ja küsimustiku koostamine, et küsimustik, kui on selline uuringu läbiviimine küsimustiku vormis, siis küsimustik peaks kindlasti toetama sinu töö sisu, andma soovitud tulemusi, neid ette ütlemata. Et see on jälle väga selline tasakaalustamise protsess järjepidevalt. Ja kõige huvitavad mõttekohad, mis võib-olla võiksid siis ka olla uutele sellistele uurimistöödele ja lõputöödele võib-olla algmaterjaliks. Et esimene, et kuidas muusika on üldse seotud isiksuse arengu ja sotsiaalsete gruppidega, et miks noored nii palju muusikaga siis suhestuvad, on just see, et nad otsivad võib-olla sealt endale selliseid eeskujusid ja rolle. Kas muusika on mõndale sotsiaalsetele gruppidele rohkem tähtsam kui teistele, et need küsimused ma jätaksingi praegu õhku võib-olla lihtsalt just, et mis minu enda jaoks jäi pärast minu töö kirjutamist ka mulle selliseks väga huvitavaks mõttekohaks edaspidiseks. Siis kuidas voogedastuse kasutus avaldab mõju kuulamisharjumustele, et kui me kogu aeg saame kontrollida, mida me kuulame, me saame kogu aeg valida endale sobivat muusikat, siis kas ja kui palju me oleme üldse valmis enam avatud uuele muusikale, mida kuulata. Siis kindlasti Eesti artistide muusika kuulamise aktiivsus, et kas see on ka seotud võib-olla sellega, et kui palju meil tegelikkuses eksisteerib Eesti muusikat voogedastuses. Ma ei mõtle siin praegu kaasaegseid artiste, aga just üleüldse meie Eesti muusikapärandit. Kas ta peaks olema voogedastuses, kas ta peaks olema meile kõigile kättesaadav või ta peabki jääma võib-olla siis selliseks muusikatunni raamides, et see on samamoodi üks väga huvitav mõttekoht, mida võiks keegi kindlasti kunagi edasi uurida, kui mitte mina, siis võib-olla keegi teine. Ja muusikaõpetuse ja vaba aja vaheline sild, et ei jääks koolielu reaalsest elust liiga kaugeks, et seda ma kindlasti üritasin siis ka oma töö teemaga nagu rohkem nii-öelda ehitada seda silda vaba aja ja kooliaja vahele ja mul on väga hea meel, et ma saan oma koostatud töö siis võtta kaasa ka oma praktilisse töösse ja päriselt siis neid kogemusi ja teadmisi kasutada. Ma tänan väga oma magistritöö juhendajat, dotsent Anu Sepp, siis kõiki muusikaõpetaja eriala õppejõude ja tänase ürituse korraldajaid ja kuulajaid. Aitäh teile!
Aitäh! Aitäh! See oli tõesti põnev. Mul tekkis kohe nii mitu uurimisküsimust või tähendab küsimust, millele tahaks vastust saada. Näiteks algoritmid meie muusikamaitse kujundajana on teema, mille üle tahaks kohe rääkida, aga me jõuame paneeldiskussioonini pärast 5 esitlust ja järgmisena ma palun siia Varvara Reino, kes tuleb rääkima meile ETV Plussi lugu. Ole hea.
Tere! Ma olen Varvara Reino ja minu lõputöö pealkiri oli venekeelse auditooriumi programmitegijate ja peamiste poliitiliste erakondade esindajate hinnangud telekanalile ETV Plus aastal 2021. Ja juhendaja on Andres Jõesaar. Käesoleva uurimistöö probleemi olemus on selles, et ETV Plussi tegevusele, vajalikkusele ja edukusele on erinevate osapoolte poolt antud väga erinevad hinnanguid ja siiani polnud teostatud kompleksset uuringut, mis hõlmaks endas nii auditooriumi, poliitikute kui ka programmi tegijate hinnanguid ETV Plussile. Telekanali puhul on 5-aastane periood sobiv aeg esimeste järelduste tegemiseks ja miks peaks ETV Plussi üldse uurima? Peamiseks põhjuseks on vajadus analüüsida, kas kanali riigieelarvest igal aastal eraldatud 2,6 miljonit eurot täidab talle seatud eesmärke. Sealhulgas vajab hindamist ka kanali olulisus lõimumise edendamisel. Töö käigus saadud hinnangud võimaldavad anda ETV Plussi tegevusele senisest oluliselt adekvaatsema hinnangu. Ja eesmärk oli siis teada saada, kuidas ETV Plussi venekeelne auditoorium, ETV Plussi tegijad ja peamiste poliitiliste erakondade esindajad hindavad ETV Plussi vajalikkust, edukust ja millised hinnanguid annavad ETV Plussile aastal 2021. Ja siis vastavalt sellele uurimisküsimused, 3 põhiküsimust ja spetsiifilisemad keskkonnast ja sihtgrupist tulenevad küsimused. Nendega võib tutvuda töös. Ja mõned lähtepunktid, need on minu teooria osa peatükid, ETV+ kui rahvusringhäälingu kanal, tähtsamad osapooled, rahvusringhäälingu roll ja kvaliteedikriteeriumid, rahvusringhääling, televisioon ja digiajastu, ETV+ vaadatavus internetis ja sotsiaalmeedia, Eesti venekeelse elanikkonna meediatarbimine ja ETV+ uuringud. Mõned töös kasutatud teooriad. Innovatsiooni difusiooni teooria kirjeldab innovatsiooni omaksvõttu erinevaid etappe ja tingimusi. Rajasõltuvus selgitab, kuidas minevikus tehtud otsused võivad praegused ja tulevasi valikuid oluliselt piirata. Strateegilise juhtimise teooria nihutab fookuse tooteturu probleemidelt ettevõtete sisemiste ressursside, rutiini ja võimete suunas, rõhutades inimressursse ja nende juhtimistegevust. Meetodiks oli valitud kombineeritud meetod, selles 3 kvantitatiivset ja venekeelse auditooriumi ning ETV+ tegijate hinnangute väljaselgitamiseks ja 1 kvalitatiivne uurimismeetod poliitikute hinnangute väljaselgitamiseks. Ja lisaks oli kasutatud teiseseid andmeallikaid, Kantor-Emori uuringuid, ERR auditooriumi uuringute andmed ja varem avaldatud artiklid. Esimene meetod, siis ETV+ Facebooki lugejate veebiküsitlus. Küsitluse aeg oli siis 24–29 jaanuar 2021 ja lugejad oli uuringu ajal 72 000, praegu neid on 130 000 juba. 10 suletud valikvastusega küsimust ja vastajaid oli 205. Teine meetod oli veebiküsitlus vastus esitatud küsimusele portaalides. 3 päeva siis ja suletud küsimus 5 palli sõnalise skaalaga ja siin on näha, milline oli keskmine külastajate arv päevas ja vastajate arv siis Russe RR-i puhul 858 inimest, Russ Postimees 1563 ja Russ Delfi 2450 vastajat. ETV+ tegijate veebiküsitlus 11–28 jaanuar, 58 tegijat oli kokku valitud, 15 suletud valikvastusega küsimust ja vastajad oli 54. Intervjuud poliitikutega läbiviimine siis jaanuar kuni veebruar ja need olid semistruktureeritud intervjuud avatud küsimustega, 6 intervjuud. Aadu Must, Riigikogu kultuurikomisjoni esimees Keskerakond, Jaak Valge, Riigikogu kultuurikomisjoni aseesimees EKRE, Viktoria Ladõnskaja-Kubits, Riigikogu kultuurikomisjoni liige, Eesti Rahvusringhäälingu nõukogu liige tol ajal Isamaa, Heidi Purga, Riigikogu kultuurikomisjoni liige Reformierakond, Jevgeni Ossinovski, Riigikogu liige, Eesti Rahvusringhäälingu nõukogu liige, SD ja Kristiina Kallas, juhatuse esimees, Eesti 200. Tulemusi ja järeldusi esitasin oma töös täiendatavuse põhimõtte alusel, täiustasin, laiendasin ja selgitasin ühel meetodil saadud tulemusi teisel meetodil saadud tulemustega. Ja olulisemad leiud. Poliitikud on enamasti teadlikud ETV+-iga seotud rajasõltuvast protsessist ehk hilise avamise veast ning innovatsiooni difusiooni omapäradest ehk ajafaktorist on innovatsiooni omaksvõtul. Poliitikud on üksmeelselt hinnanud ETV+ edukust 5 palli skaalal hindega 4, vajalikkust ning eesmärkide saavutamist hinnati ka heaks. ETV+ arenguruum vaatamata üldiselt positiivsetele hinnangutele poliitikute poolt oli vestluste käigus ikkagi enim mainitud teema. Teine poliitikute poolt enim mainitud teema oli ETV+ ja koroonakriis. Poliitikute hinnangul kriis tõestas kanali vajalikkust. Võimalikest arengusuundadest mainiti kõige poliitikute poolt enim koostööd Ruuse RR portaali ning Raadio 4-ga ja ERR-i venekeelse suuna arendamist tervikuna. Uuring näitas, et ETV+ saavutust kaasa arvatud veebikeskkonna saavutuste ühiskonnale teadvustamine ei ole olnud piisav. Innovatsiooni difusiooni teooria järgi on ETV+ arengu jaoks kriitilise tähtsusega nii vene kui eestikeelse kogukondade arvamusliidrite toetus, mis väljendub ka oma toodangu suunamises ja sellega seotud jätkuvat probleemi ETV+ kontekstis kirjeldab näiteks Hagi Shein oma uues raamatus peatükis poleemika PBK-s edastavate Tallinna tellitud saadete ümber. ETV+ programmi tegijate hinnangud telekanalile on positiivsed, kuid mõned aspektid vajavad strateegilise juhtimise teooria järgi tähelepanu. Nendeks aspektideks on sisekommunikatsioon, kanali arengustrateegia, vajalike ressursside olemasolu ning oma tööle antud tagasiside kvaliteet. Rääkides venekeelse auditooriumi hinnangutest ETV+-ile, ma toon välja silmanähtava erinevuse hinnangutes nende vahel, kes on ETV+ või ERR-i enda jaoks juba infoallikana kindlalt valinud ja nende vahel, kes seda veel teinud pole. Ja siin on ilmselgelt lõimumine venekeelsete meedia tarbimise mustrid väga olulised tegurid, nagu ka tehtud intervjuud on näidanud. Siin graafikute pealt näeb siis Facebooki küsitluse tulemusi ja tulemusi portaalides just vajalikkuse osas, ETV+ vajalikkuse. Selle uurimistöö oluline leid on see, et mitte kõik ETV+ Facebooki lugejad uuringu ajal siis 72 000 inimest ei vaata ETV+ televiisorist. Ja ma pean oluliseks ka rõhutada, et ETV+ keskmine unikaalsete kasutajate arv keskkonnas etvplus.ee ERR andmetel oli aastal 2020 keskmiselt 6413 inimest nädalas. See näitab, et ETV+ on olemas lugejaskond ja vaatajaskond, mida Kanter Emori telemõõdikuuring ei arvesta. Ja ETV+ rahastamist aastal 2021 peavad poliitikud üldiselt piisavaks ja mõned isegi väheseks. Ja üks huvitav intervjuude leid ETV+ kontekstis oli termin sümboolne väärtus. Tulemuste ja järelduste põhjal ma esitasin enda poolt 10 ettepanekut oma soovituste ning edasiste uurimisvõimaluste nimetamisega. Ja üks võib-olla kõige tähtsam uurimisvõimalus näiteks magistritöö raames on ETV+ põhitoimetusmeeskonna hinnangute ning ETV+ arengustrateegia kvalitatiivne uurimine, et teaduslikult toetada kanali tõhusamat juhtimist ja arengut. Ja nii palju siis minu poolt, ma arvan, et seda protsessi ma pigem sellest räägiks paneeli diskussiooni ajal, et töö on päris mahukas. Aitäh!
Aitäh, Varvara. Teatud põhjustel olen ma selle tööga üsna detailselt kursis ja praegu küsimusi ei esita. Aga lähme nüüd edasi Zoomiga. And now we will switch into English language and we will continue our mini-conference Academic Pop over the Zoom. Next presentation will be by Transmedia graduate, Kate Chakure. Kate, are you there?
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Dean. Okay.
How are you?
I'm good.
So, in which country you are right now?
I'm just in Tallinn.
In Tallinn? Why are you not here?
Because I couldn't fit in time between shifts.
Okay, Tallinn is also a nice place to be. But now, now it's time to start your presentation. Please, screen is yours.
Okay, do you see the screen blue? Yeah, should be. Okay, hello, my name is Kate Chakure, or call me Kate, and I am a big fan of, oops, sorry, got the last slide, okay. And I am a big fan of structure. Now, because I graduated from BFM, I'm not going to be talking about how to structure your day or how to construct an energy-efficient home, but about narrative structure. Narrative structure is about focusing on the bigger picture first before diving into any kind of details of a story. It's helped me to finish a lot more creative work than before I was introduced to the principles of structure. And it also helped me to write my bachelor's thesis, which was the Aristotelian structure and Sitfeld's paradigm in relation to transmedia storytelling. So these two series talk about their own specific media, but transmedia storytelling involves a lot more different platforms. So the main aim of my thesis was to determine whether any kind of transmedia stories can be applied these classic theories. What is transmedia storytelling? I think I can explain it best by introducing the practical part of my thesis, the transmedia project that I was a part of, which is called Sweet Issues. The first installment of it is a short film called 200 grams of sugar, pinch of salt, which tells the story about a young aspiring baker, Anna, who enters a baking competition in hopes to get her own cafe. There she meets her biggest opponent, who turns out to be her childhood friend, Lisa. And so the two girls have to decide what they're really fighting for. In the short film, young Anna gets inspired to bake because of the children's book, Why Donuts Have Holes. This one tells the story about a neglected donut, Stella, who enters a grand party of all the pretty donuts. There she meets Billy, who insults her scar. And somehow in this process, Stella decides that what makes these donuts mean is the chocolate inside of them. And so she and her newly assembled army of vampires take this chocolate, this toxicity away from them and basically wage war against them. If you're hungry because of the cover of the book and because of the short film, there is the donut recipe interactive video, which tells how to bake this one donut and 3 other recipes from films and TV. And so you can see how these 3 stories are part of the same universe and they are interconnected. The first theory is the Aristotelian structure. Aristotle was active, obviously, a long time ago. So there's this concept of wise old men that we're still listening to, even though they know nothing about the current state of affairs. But their theories, like this structural theories are still relevant to this day because the principles are so simple and they still work and they're still applied. Like Aristotle was one of the first people to actually talk about narrative structure. The most simple idea of it is beginning, middle, and end to a story. And then Aristotle split a story into 2 parts, complication and denouement. And those 2 are split by the change of fortune. So the protagonist goes from having good luck to bad or the other way around. Usually it's located after the middle of the story, more towards the end, as I saw with my case studies, the feature film Booksmart, and also the Life is Strange comics, which were a part of a Life is Strange transmedia case study. But in the 2 narrative stories of the project, both of them have the change of fortune right in the middle of the story. So here, Lisa wins over Anna in the baking competition, so Anna's fortune changes from good to bad. And then in Why Donuts Have Holes, Stella decides to take matters into her own hands and changes her bad fortune to good. So we're going to see if this being situated right in the middle affects any other structural parts or not. Then another thing that Aristotle talks about is reversals and recognitions. A reversal being something new is introduced to the protagonist, and recognition is how they decide to deal with this new information. Both of the stories are built on reversals and recognitions because in the beginning of 200 grams, the 2 girls are baking together as children. In the middle, Lisa wins over Anna in the baking competition. And then in the end, they are back to working together in their co-owned cafe. And Why Donuts Have Holes, in the story, reversals and recognitions follow right after each other, almost page after page. Another interesting thing was that In my case study analysis, in the first Life is Strange game, reversals and recognitions were not only a part of the linear narrative, but also within the game mechanic, because you could go back in time, reverse, and choose a different option, so the recognition is also different. And then there is Sitfield's paradigm, which is also known as the 3-act structure. It is a framework meant specifically for feature films, but the short film, 200 grams, was built based on these principles, so it is a near perfect example of it as well. So the first event that happens within Act 1 is the inciting instant, which sets the story in motion, presents the protagonist with something new, something exciting, yet frightening. So for Anna, it's Lisa's suggestion to take this baking idea thing further. And so Anna does take it further because she bakes for many upcoming years. Plot point 1 is the point of no return, where the protagonist is ready to face that new unknown world and face whatever challenges may lie ahead. For Anna, it's receiving an invitation to a baking competition. So she finally has a prospect in her future to achieve her dreams, and she is ready to step into Act 2. Right in the middle of the story is another point that somehow changes the trajectory of the story of the protagonist, which is the midpoint. Usually it is the least dramatic moment of all of these. However, in 200 grams, it's actually the most dramatic moment because it's also the change of fortune. So here we see an imbalance, which makes the story a bit confusing because the least dramatic moment is also the most dramatic moment according to two different theories. But as I observed from my case study, it was best if the change of fortune aligned with plot point 2, which is the lowest moment for the protagonist. They are the furthest from their goal. Everything seems hopeless. For Anna, it's mistaking ingredients and quitting the competition entirely. So losing any kind of prospect. And then it is up to Act 3 to resolve any kind of situation that was presented before. Here, there was also some discussion about plot points because in one of the earlier versions of the story, plot point 2 followed the definition really closely. However, later it was changed to something that wasn't followed too closely. So, and this actually provided a more original story point. So blindly following just the definition, the description of the plot points can actually take away from a more original story. So it's always important to be careful about that. And then in Why Donuts Oppose, the situation is different. Like the furniture is still there, but it's moved around the room a little, so the decor feels a bit off. The inciting incident is Billy insulting Stella's scar. And then plot point 1 is right in the middle of the story, which is again the change of fortune. So here there is an imbalance yet again. So these two are, the plot point 1 is way too far in the story, and then the midpoint happens only a couple of pages after, way too close again. So the dramatic highs and lows are not really emphasized as much, and the flow of the story is way worse. And then plot point 2 is Stella seeing the melted chocolate, that all her efforts have been for nothing. And then Act 3, the two groups come together. So this is the situation. And so my main conclusion is that it doesn't really matter on the platform where you're telling the story, but rather if you actually have other story elements present within the story. And so I was just assured of the importance of structure. And it's also, it might be interesting to compare between the structures to see if those somehow align or not, and how that may affect the dramatic arc. And so I was convinced of the power of narrative structure, And it is obviously up to every individual person to determine whether they are or not, because at the end of the day, it's about whatever gets you to get going, to keep moving further in the story. But it sure is nice to know where you're going to arrive, so you know what kind of clothes to pack for the trip. So thank you for your attention.
Ja meil on suuvis valmis kunstiõpetaja Ivo Visak, kelle ettekande nimi on koos disainimisega seotud toetatud õppiva organisatsiooni loomine ühes gümnaasiumi näitel. Nii, uus katse. Thank you, Kate. And we will continue from here with a next Zoom presentation. Me jätkame siit järgmise Zoomi ettekandega ja järgmiseks on meil ekraanil Ivo Visak, kunstiõpetaja, meie ülikooli magistrikraadi omanik. Palun.
No nii, kas on mind kuulda?
Jaa.
Väga hästi, tervist. Alustan siis enda esitlusega, kohe jagan ka enda ekraani. Nii. No vot, tõepoolest selline keeruline nimi minu magistritööl on. Ehk siis koos disainimisega toetatud õppeorganisatsiooni loomine ühe gümnaasiumi näitel. Minu magistritöö juhendajaks oli Eesti Kunstiakadeemia õppejõud Merike Rehepapp ja töö ise sündis tegelikult väga isiklikust vajadusest. Nimelt eelmisel aastal valiti mind Saaremaa riigigümnaasiumi koolijuhiks ja õige pea hakkasin ma koheselt selle peale mõtlema, et millised on siis ikkagi need probleemid, millega me tänasel hetkel koolides kokku puutume. Ja sai see sõnastatud siis järgmiselt. Koolides on sageli õpetajate vaheline koostöö puudulik, esineb koostööd pärssivat diskursuseid ning on puudus ka koostöisest õpetamisest. Ehk siis, mida on ka erinevad Eesti uuringud öelnud, on see, et Eesti õpetajad teevad väga head koostööd selles puhul, kui rääkida selles, kuidas ühel õpilasel näiteks õppeedukus on, aga kas õpetajad teevad omavahel koostööd, siis üldjoontes seal see statistika on üsnagi kurb. Ja mida see siis tähendab, on ka see, et Eesti õpetajate seas näiteks suhtumine sellesse, et käiakse teineteise tunde vaatamas, või et õpitakse teineteise tundide vaatamisest. Seda nähakse tihtipeale ka sellise aspektina, kus pigem kardetakse, et kui teine õpetaja tuleb tundi vaatama, siis ühtlasi ka hinnatakse selle õpetaja tööd. Ehk siis kardetakse tegelikult teise õpetaja kriitikat. Ja eesmärk oligi siis leida erinevaid meetodeid, tehnikaid ja tööriistu õpetajate vahelise koostöö käivitamiseks ja arendamiseks loodavas koolis. Püstitasin ka tegelikult siis kogu selle laiema eesmärgiga 2 uurimisküsimust. Üks neist oli siis see, et kuidas koostöömudel, mida ma kohe teile ka näitan, toetab õppeorganisatsiooni loomist uues gümnaasiumis ja teine küsimus, kuidas võiks koostöömudelit rakendada professionaalses õppimises. Võib-olla paslik olekski siin puhul rääkida siis 2 pedagoogilisest mõistest. Ühelt poolt siis professionaalne õpikogukond, ehk siis professional learning community, kus peaasjalikult me räägime sellisest lihtsalt öeldes projektipõhisest õpetajate vahelisest koostöös. Ehk siis veidikene on muudetud klassikalist ainekomisjonides töötamist projekti maailmale lähemale. Ja teine pool siis ka räägime väga palju sellisest õppivast organisatsioonist, ehk siis learning organization, mida võiks siis panna vastamisi siis sellisele konkurentsipõhisele organisatsioonile, ehk siis õppevariotatsiooni üks eesmärkidest ongi just nimelt see, et organisatsioonis ka õpetaja on õppija. Ehk siis mitte niivõrd keskenduda kogu kontekst alati sellele, et õpetaja ainult õpib, vaid tõepoolest läbi selle, et õpetaja ise õpib pidevalt, on ka võimalik õpilastele tuua pidevalt lauda uut ja põnevat ning samal ajal olla ka õpetajatega et olla ka õpilastel alati põnev. Teie ees on siis meeskonna koostöömudel. Meeskonna koostöömudeli näol see ongi siis loodud Merike Rehepopi poolt ja mina siis katsetasin seda enda sellise kooli algatusmeeskonnaga, kellega oli võimalik siis ka seda mudelit alustuseks katsetada. Ja koosneb ta siis tegelikult mitmest sellisest teoreetilisest mudelist omaette. Üheks oluliseks psühholoogia tööriistaks, mis siin all kaigub, on enesemääramise teooria, tuntud inglise keeles ka kui self-determination theory, mille on DC ja Ryan ära sõnastanud. Ehk siis millest koosneb ühe inimese motivatsioon on üldjoontes siis kuuluvus, kompetents ja autonoomia. Kompetentsi puhul siis ka puhkudel lõigitakse kui pädevust ja teiselt poolt siis on siin laiemalt ka Howelli poolt sõnastatud kompetentsimudel taustaks. Ja mis selle mudeli ja miks ta disainerlik lähenemine mudelil on see, et tõepoolest kõik need etapid siin on eelnevalt läbi kaalutletud, sellepärast et päeva lõpuks ühel või teisel juhul me peame jõudma kokkulepetele, kuidas me üldse meeskonnana töötame. Ja selle koostöömudeli eesmärk ongi laiemas plaanis just nimelt see, et kui meeskond on kokku tulnud, siis ta on jõudnud ka mingisuguste ühiste nägemusteni. Saadakse teineteise soovidest aru, saadakse aru sellest, kuhu tegelikult see meeskond enda sügavamate motivatsioonide, just nimelt seesmiste motivatsioonide, mitte väliste motivatsioonide näol jõuda tahab. Teoreetiliste väidetena, mis siis veel kõike seda toetasid, ühelt poolt Mansiini poolt öeldud, et aja jooksul on järjest enam nihkumas koosdisainimise rakendamine kõikides eluvaldkondadesse, sotsiaalsed innovatsioonid rohujuure tasandil toimuvad väikestes kogukondades või suurlinnades, kutsuvad esile muutuseid ühiskonnas. Mida see kõik siis tähendab? Üleüldiselt, kui me kasutame siin töös ka sellist mõistet nagu koosdisainimine, siis inglisekeelse mõistena tal ongi kõige paremaks mõisteks inglisekeelne co-design. Ja edukalt toetatud koosdisainimise kogemus aitab kaasa positiivsele professionaalse õpikogukonna kasvule ning viis edasi mitmete teiste edukate tuleviku koostööprojektidele, mis on siis Quanni poolt 2014 ja tema uurimisgrupi poolt ellu viidud töö Ameerika ühes suures keskkoolis, kus siis ka nähti seda, et koosdisainimise meetodite kasutamine just nimelt professionaalsete õpikogukonnade kontekstis võib aidata õpetajatel jõuda just nimelt selliste väga ägedate koostööprojektideni. Ja tegemist oli kvalitatiivse juhtumi uuringuga, kasutasin siis sellist analüüsimeetodit nagu reflektiivne temaatiline analüüs, pikalt sellest ei räägi, aga võib-olla kõige paslikum ongi siis ka rääkida sellest, milleni ma siis lõpuks jõudsin. Esimene selle mudeli kasutamise juurde see, et läbi koostöömudeli töötamise aitas kaardistada meeskonna erinevate liikmete motivatsiooni, kompetentsi ja nõrkuseid, mis omakorda siis andis selgema pildi sellest, millistes punktides on meeskonna ühisosa ning ühised õpivajadused. Ehk siis seesama asi, mis toetab ühte õppivat organisatsiooni, meil on vaja tegelikult aru saada sellest, mida me tegelikult üldse õppima peame, mida peab üks haridusasutus, kes tahab olla õppiv organisatsioon, millele ta peab siis ka panustama. Väga oluline küsimus oli siin puhul ka see, et esitati tegelikult neid küsimusi, mis võiksid muidu jääda esitamata. Ehk siis tuntakse ennast enam seotuna ka koolielu erinevate küsimustega, mida isiklikult võib-olla põhitööna igapäevaselt ei peagi lahendama. Ehk siis on see juhiabi, on see koolipsühholoog ja ka tema tunneb tegelikult selliste meetoditena ennast enam kaasatuna. Ja oluline siis ka selle, nii nagu ma mingis mõttes ka eelnevas punktis välja tuli, on see, et koostöömudel toetab õppivat organisatsiooni läbi selle, et see algatab uusi mõttevahetusi tuues osalejatele siis ühtsemat arusaama üksteisest ja üksteisest vajadustest ning koostöömudeli toel õpitakse liikmete tagasidest enda soove paremini defineerima kõigile arusaadavat viisil. Ehk siis nähakse ka seda just nimelt sellise laiemalt kooli lõimiku arendamise töö. Ja koostöömudelil on üldiselt veel laiem rakendamisvõimalus kooli keskkonnas. Võime rääkida siis sellest, et seda saab kasutada nii potentsiaalselt isiklike tunnete ning motivatsioonide sõnastamiseks kunstitunnis või siis ka näiteks klassijuhataja või mentori tööriistaks õpilastega arenguvestluste läbiviimisel. Ehk siis omalt poolt ütleksin ma võib-olla täiendavalt juurde seda, et Saaremaa gümnaasiumis me oleme selle teekonna nüüd endale ette võtnud, oleme asunud siis ka õpetajaid selles vallas välja koolitama ja proovime enam siis ka disainimeetodeid tuua koolikeskkonda sisse. Veel üheks selliseks väga suureks inspiratsiooniks kogu selle magistritöö loomise juures oli Taani disaini- ja majanduskool Kaaspilot, kes on siis ka töötanud välja sellise süsteemi nagu Learning Arches, mida siis tõesti võib nimetada selliseks haridusdisaini väga heaks näiteks ja liigume siis selles suunas, et ka neid samu õpikaari hakata rohkem kasutama enda koolikeskkonnas. Ja, minu poolt praeguseks hetkeks kõik.
Suur tänu. See oli tore ülevaade kahe kõrgkooli vahelise koostöö tulemusel sündinud väärikast ja väga kasulikust magistritööst. Liigume edasi, meil on jäänud veel 2 esitlust ja esimene neist on Minna Rädü. Palun, anglitsismide temaatikat käsitlev töö.
No nii, tere. Et aitäh neile, kes veel siin kuulevad. Et mina olen siis Minna Rädü ning mina uurisin oma lõputöös siis anglitsismide esinemist Eesti reklaami keeles 2020. aasta välireklaamide näitel. Et minu juhendajaks oli Helen Noormets. Et ma siin, kui mulle öeldi, et ma tuleks rääkima, siis räägin oma protsessis ka natukene. Et aasta tagasi mul ei olnud õrna aimugi, millest ma veel teen oma bakatööd. Aga kuna ma töötan ühes tõlkebüroos, seega ma mõtlesin, mingi keeleteemat võiks lahata, kuna ma olen ise ka õppinud eesti keelt varasemalt, mis tõttu ma võtsingi siis oma teemaks anglitsismid ja kui palju siis neid esineb Eesti välireklaamis. Et alustuseks ma siis avangi anglitsismi mõiste neile, kes siis ei ole võib-olla sellega kursis. Et Eesti Keele Instituut toob välja, et anglitsism on keeleline inglispärasus mõnes teises keeles, et siin puhul siis eesti keeles. Et valisingi siis selle teemas, ma juba pikalt täheldanud, et inglise keele osakaal meie keeles aina suureneb. Et sellel on siis erinevaid põhjuseid, et kuna inglise keel on mõningates valdkondades liiderkeel, arenevad inglise keeles mõned mõisted varem välja ning kui oma keeles puudub selle kohta mõiste, siis hakataksegi kasutama ingliskeelset väljendit. Et reklaamisõnumi koostades tuleb mõelda ka sihtgrupile. Näiteks, kui püüad nooremat sihtgruppi, võib kasutada vabamat sõnavara, kuid vanematele tarbijatele appelleerides tuleks kasutada sõnavara, mis on kirjakeelne ning lugupidav. Inglise keelt kasutatakse ka, et brändi positsioneerida. Et mõnikord on meelega kasutatud ingliskeelset sõnavara, et positsioneerida end ülemaailmse tegijana või jätta tarbijale mulje, et bränd on välismaine. Et minu töös oligi siis 2 uurimisküsimust. Et esiteks, et kui palju anglitsisme leidub Eesti välireklaamis ning millistes tootekategooriates neid esineb ning milliseid laensõnade liike leidub Eesti välireklaamides. Nii. Oma töö empiirik osas kasutasin ma siis Liiva ja Kasiku teoreetilist raamistikku, mis jaguneb järgmiselt. Esimene on siis tsitaatsõna ja väljendid. Et inglise keeles pärit sõna kasutatakse originaalkujul, kus laene kirjutatakse ja hääldatakse samamoodi nagu originaalkeeles, nagu näiteks all right või tax free, barbecue, brunch. Teiseks on inglise ortograafial põhinevad mugandid. Sõnad, mida eesti keeles siis hääldatakse nii, nagu neid inglise keeles kirjutatakse. Näideteks võib tuua teller, partner, hamburger, poster ja folk näiteks. ning kolmandaks on inglise häälduskujul põhinevad mugandid ehk siis väljendid, mida eesti keeles kirjutatakse nii, nagu neid inglise keeles hääldatakse, nagu dealer, freak, mail ja fänn. Et oma töös ma siis uurisingi Eesti suurima välireklaame vahendava ettevõtte Jõesaar 2020. aasta välireklaame, mida oli selles kataloogis 2181 tükki. Kasutasin seal Jõesaar endi kategooriaid. Et analüüsida üle 2000 reklaami, siis kasutasin kodeerimistabelit, kasutades content analüüsi ning kvalitatiivset sisuanalüüsi. Abi sain ma erinevatest EKI sõnastikest, näiteks ka anglitsismi sõnastik ja ka sõnaveebi kasutasin. Ehkki tihtipeale oli reklaamil kirjas ka ingliskeelne tõlge, brändi loosung või toote nimi, siis oma töös kasutasin vaid ainult reklaami sõnumi osa. Et kataloog nägi siis välja selline, et seal oli 2181 faili. Nagu näete, siis on seal faili nimes on kirjutatud reklaami tellija, siis mis oli nende endi kategooria, mis seal pandi ning millisel nädalal seda kasutati. Siin on siis kodeerimistabeli näidis, et nagu näha olen siin kasutanud, olen pannud faili nimekirja, siit samast faili nimes sain ka nende endi kategooria ning siis ja siin on siis kodeerimistabel ehk siis põhimõtteliselt see 3 kategooriat ja siis ma seal neid ristitasin. Nii, et järeldused. Et nagu näha sellest tabelist oli kõige rohkem inglise ortograafial põhinevaid mugandeid reklaamitekstis ning kõige vähem oli inglise häälduskujul põhinevaid mugandeid. Kokku oli anglitsisme 18,43% ehk siis ligi 5%. Pea igas kategoorias leidus anglitsisme, välja arvatud poliitikareklaamides, kus siis ei leidunud ühtegi. Muidugi eelmine aasta veel ei olnud eriti poliitikareklaame 2020. aastal ei olnud. Võib-olla kui see aasta teha sama uurimus oleks teine, sellepärast et nüüd on hetkel poliitreklaame kõik kohad täis. Et oma kategooria lõikes oli siis kõige rohkem hariduse, isikliku hügieeni ning teenuste kategooriates ning kõige vähem oli ehituse ja aianduse ning telekommunikatsiooni kategooriates. Kui vaadata üldpilti, siis kõige rohkem anglitsisme arvu poolest oli meelelahutuse ja kultuuri, jaekaubanduse ja teenuste kategooriates ning kõige vähem oli meedia, äri ja kinnisvara ning telekommunikatsiooni kategooriates. Analüüsides neid reklaame, avastasin, et ligi 5% reklaamides siis leidus anglitsisme. Leemets on ka öelnud, et ootuspäraselt on rohkesti uusi laene neis valdkondades, mis on hiljuti aktuaalseks saanud või mille mõistesüsteem on varasemaga võrreldes uuenenud või teisenenud. Minu tööst tuli see ka välja, mistap oligi ootuspäraselt kõige rohkem anglitsisme meelelahutuse ja kultuuri, jaekaubanduse ning teenuste kategooriates. Ehkki ma sihtgrupile suunatud reklaame konkreetselt ei uurinud, panin siiski tähele, et noortele suunatud reklaamides on kasutatud rohkem anglitsisme. Näiteks LHV kirjutas oma reklaamis, näitan ka seda, hai tudengelu, pai plastik ning Maxima on kasutanud sellist koolialguskampaaniat koolilt kooli. Et ma tean, et üks reklaami 3. kursuse tudeng vist ka nüüd hakkab uurima seda teemat, et kuidas on siis noorte seas vastuvõtt just nende koolialguskampaaniatele. Et nii palju, kui ma ise uurisin oma sõpradelt, siis enamasti pööritati silmi selliste reklaamsõnumite peale. Nii, ja siis siin on näiteks on Minori reklaam, kus kohas on kõik 3 anglitsismi siis seda kategooriat esindatud. Et tsitaatsõnadest on siin startup, inglise ortograafial põhinev sõna on innovatsioon ning häälduskujul on näiteks disain. Ning viimaseks näitan ühe Kaup 24 reklaami Black Sale. Et nii. Ja, igal juhul. Aitäh, et kutsusite ning aitäh.
Aitäh, Minna. Väga põnev. Me selle anglitsismidega oleme ka tänasel päeval Eesti kultuuri- ja haridusmaastiku üsna rikkalikult rikastanud. Cool. Aga meie viimane akadeemilise Boobi ettekanne tuleb meie doktorandilt ja kolleegilt Michael. Michael Keerdo, please. Now you are the last but not least, nagu as Estonians say.
Hello. Yes, my name is Michael Cody-Dawson, and I'm here to talk about film interactivity and film dramaturgy and interactivity, and what happens when we put these things together. I'm on my PhD research, and it is an artistic research, which means I've done an audio-visual experiment. I've made a film, and I'm halfway through the process. So I'm only just sort of reflecting on the process now. I'm 2 years into the research. But this is kind of like preliminary reflections about what I found so far. So the title of this presentation is rather playfully Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, Act 3, Act 3, Act 3, Act 3. So decentering the climax as the terminal of the thematic statement. And I'll hopefully explain what all of this stuff means as we go on. So yes, I've made an interactive film. To kind of talk about the film briefly, I'll just summarize the plot. So it's called The Limits of Consent, and it is basically the protagonist is a woman called Anna. She has a very toxic relationship with her therapist, and her job is a very strange job where she's basically a high-tech pickup artist who is using modern technology to manipulate lonely women into having sex with awkward men. And she's doing this on the night in question, and something happens. Her target says something that triggers her, and she rushes to the airport to find her lover and to go away with him. She finds him, but then she loses him again, and she realizes that she's been manipulated as well. So the central irony of the film is that she's a master manipulator, but she herself is also manipulated in this process. Now, I'd like to thank my supervisee, Kate, actually, who's done a lot of the hard work for me by explaining the Sydfieldian three-act structure in an earlier presentation. Because what I've described to you here so far is actually Act 1 and Act 2. So Act 1, just to recap, is like setup. What's at stake, what's the story about, what are the facts on the ground. Act 2 is then an elaboration on the conflict, a deepening of an escalation of the conflict and a deepening of the character. And then traditionally, yes, as Kate said, Act 2 ends with a kind of a low point for the protagonist, or a moment when the protagonist either abandons their goal or succeeds in their goal, but finds out that their goal isn't what they want. And then my film does something rather strange at this point. Instead of plowing onto Act 3, it splinters, and it goes into multiple directions, offering you not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 Act 3s. And as you can see, when we lay it out diagrammatically like this, it resembles a tree. And it's called the tree structure. It's not my idea. This is coined by an independent scholar called Mare Ryan. And I've kind of like put it here as a sapling. It's like a baby tree, right? It's not so developed. There's only a few branches. What's the upshot of this? Well, this decision to put the first decision point or node at the end of Act 2 was born of a logistical constraint, which is that the earlier I put the decision point, the more material I have to film, and with limited resources, how can I film so much? So I kept pushing the point of the decision back further and further. And then found that this end of Act 2 was kind of a natural point to put this decision point in place. The upshot of this, okay, trees tend to have long trunks. Trees tend to have long trunks. It's true. You walk around and look at some trees. I've been doing a lot of it recently. they tend to have long trunks. And what is advantageous for the tree, I don't know why, I'm not a botanist, but what is advantageous for the tree might be advantageous for the dramaturg who tries to mirror its structure. The reason I say this would be then, okay, first of all, that we have a long trunk. This gives us a meaningful context for viewer decision. So the further back the node goes, the further back the first decision goes, the more time you have with the protagonist, the more time you understand what he or she wants and what their goal is and what they're after, the more that you understand what's at stake when you make the decision. So it gives you a meaningful context in a way that had I put the first decision point at the end of Act 1, then the decision would be rather arbitrary. You wouldn't necessarily know what was at stake. You wouldn't necessarily know what you were choosing. Next upshot is that, okay, limited possible endings avoids superficial differences. So within this scheme, in the first sort of early drafts of the story, there were 12 endings, but they were kind of more or less shades of grey of one another within the plausibility of character development. They weren't so extreme. And the extreme ones were the more interesting ones, so I cut them all out and I left it as the extreme endings and got rid of the superficial differences. So in a kind of less is more sort of sense. And then downside of this is possibly a greater danger of estrangement, as in, you know, you're watching the film for 40 minutes and then suddenly you're asked to make a decision. This is a risk. This is a risky strategy. I don't know whether it'll work yet. I'll find out when it's finished. It's also a very closed system. We only make 4 decisions in the course of the narrative, which leads us to 5 different endings. It is interactive. Is it interactive enough? This is also another kind of question. Okay, so then this leads us to the more interesting area, which is the thematic statement. So what is a thematic statement? Well, a theme is the idea or image that runs through the film, a recurring idea which runs through the film or runs through any kind of narrative. And the thematic statement, well, when does the position of the author become clearest on the theme at hand? It becomes clearest at the end, where we make a thematic statement. So if we look at Romeo and Juliet, for example, does Romeo kill himself at the end? If he does, then love is eternal, even in death. If he doesn't, then, you know, okay, I'll find a new girlfriend and replace Juliet. It means something completely different. So the theme can still be love, but how we elaborate on it at the end of the story, this changes the thematic statement. So I have an advantage that a traditional filmmaker does not. I have 5 endings. So what does it all mean? I have 5 endings. I therefore have the opportunity to make 5 thematic statements. So, for example, the first ending, the thematic statement might be read as the consequences of sexual misconduct will be overcome. And this is a didactic ending, meaning that I could give it to 100 people and I would have 95 people say the same thing. And it's main plot focused. I have a second ending. Sexual misconduct is acceptable. This is also a didactic ending and it's main plot focused. Ending 3 is an ambiguous ending and it's subplot focused. Ambiguous meaning that if I give it to 100 people, I will get 95 different readings about what it means. So it's the opposite of this didacticism. Ending 4 is also didactic, it's subplot focused, and it says that we are all complicit in perpetrating sexual misconduct. And then ending 5 is also ambiguous and it is subplot focused. So within this film, I have 3 didactic endings and 2 ambiguous endings, all elaborating on the same theme, which is the gray zones of sexual consent. So I'm able to say multiple things. What's the point? What's the point of all this? Well, first of all, the fractured climax offers us to make multiple statements on one story. So I don't have to just say one thing anymore, as I already said. The interactivity removes the privileging of one of these statements over the other to a certain extent. And by that I mean that if I had a traditional film, yes, I could have multiple climaxes in a traditional film, but whichever one I finish on, that's the one the audience is going to take home. Whichever one comes last, that's the one that the audience is going to take with them. Now, I enumerated these 5 endings just for the purposes of clarity, but actually there's no reason why you would take ending 1 and not ending 2, or ending 3 and not ending 4. I'm not directing you in any way. It's your choice which ending you take. So the privileging is gone of these different endings. This allows a new way, I think, to explore contradictory thematic statements. So between sexual misconduct will be overcome and sexual misconduct is acceptable to a certain extent, these are directly contradictory thematic statements. They do not make sense together. And the first is contradicting the second, or the second is contradicting the first. The contradiction is bidirectional, depending on which way you go through the story. This is also a different way of making the statement. Offering a new way to thread the needle between didacticism and ambiguity. So I don't have to be super clear and I don't have to be super vague. I can be something in the middle when using this technique. This creating a certain amount of ambivalence. So we have multiple didactic and ambiguous endings in one package. It's a complicated issue. It's a moral gray zone. So I am now allowed, I have permission within this scheme to say more than one thing and have more than one correct answer to the question that the film raises. The endings add new color to one another, highlighting moral gray zones that would otherwise remain hidden. So depending on the order that you take the material, the meaning changes as well. If you take it ending 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 versus if you take it 3, 2, 4, 1, the feeling that you will get will be different. So potentially everybody in this room could watch the film, take it in a different order, and get a different kind of moral texture, shall we say, from it. And lastly, this decenters the author as a moral arbiter to a certain extent. So as the author, you take a moral position on the thematics that you're working with. And here I'm taking a step back and I'm actually giving over kind of moral arbitration to the audience, but without being ambiguous and vague about what I'm saying. So that's my presentation. Thank you for listening.
We can actually move to this panel table right now. And the first question is, when we can watch a film? Should take some microphone.
Is this working? Yes. The film will be out, hope will be finished before the end of the year and will hopefully be out early next year.
Okay, then we will have hard decisions to make as audience, to choose, pick the right one.
Whichever one's right for you.
Yeah, exactly. Läheme edasi meie diskussiooniga. Let's continue with the panel discussion. Palun kõik esitlejad, kes te siin olete, siia ette tulla. We will use one microphone, so pass the microphone when the question is. And the hope presenter in the Zoom are also there. Can you share the screen so we could... see, yes, I can see. Michael has a microphone and I ask a question which will be relevant for all of you. What is most difficult now in the process? You are in the middle of, or actually quite close to the defense of your doctoral thesis. What was, or what is the hardest point on this journey?
No, I have 2 more years before I defend.
Yeah, but it's film is almost there.
The hardest bit is over. Yeah, okay. From the PhD perspective, the hardest part I think is the anxiety that comes with the lack of structure. In that you have to determine your own structure and you have to determine nobody's helping you to kind of. Nobody's holding your hand as you go through the process so closely anymore. So there's this sense that it's all up to you. And am I doing enough or am I not doing enough? That's probably the most difficult thing. And I think a lot of PhD researchers suffer from a lot of anxiety about this part. But I'll hand over to somebody else.
Yeah, Minna. Mis on siis kõige raskem? What has been the most difficult learning writing your thesis?
I think my answer is quite similar, since I think the discipline part is quite hard for me to find the motivation to write, since I don't think I work like continuously like other people do, like every week to write something. I usually write in sprints, so if the deadline is coming, then I will write a lot of chunk of the work, and so yeah, to find the discipline, I think. the most hard.
Okay, thank you. Varvara, what was your motivation? And what was the most difficult point? 2 questions right now.
Okay, to start with, well, I think I know it's not justified, but really, I also know I'm not alone in this, but I think it was the fear just to start with something, you know, because you're scared that it might be irrelevant or not good enough. So you're like paralyzed with the fear, and then you just have to start somewhere. And yeah, the rest was easier. And motivation, I think the main thing is that I am a TV professional myself. I work for ETV Plus for 4 years at the time when I started my thesis. So my motivation was actually to know if I was actually doing a good job, because there was no answer. So I was motivated to find it myself.
Okay. Ja samad küsimused. What has been the most difficult and the motivation?
Ja, no kõige raskem minu jaoks oli just see teoreetilise aluse loomine, et ma väga palju jäin mõtlema nagu ühe koha peale, et kuidas ma asju sõnastan, ja kuna töömaht on ikkagi küllaltki suur, siis lihtsalt aeg nagu kaob käest ära, kui tahad iga sõna väga sisukalt läbi mõelda, kuidas sa selle kirja paned. Aga motivatsioon kindlasti oli see, et oma töösse see kasutusse võtta ja leida siis see nii-öelda sild õpilaste igapäevaelu ja koolielu vahel.
Sama küsimus, nüüd küsin Ivo Visak. Ei ole teda, aigu kahju. Oleks just küsinud ka praktiliselt õpetajatöö nurga alt. We don't have Ivo Visak in the Zoom anymore. That's a pity, but we have Kate. What was the most learning difficultest point in your journey, and what was the motivator keeping you alive?
The most difficult part, I guess, was like right in the beginning, where I wasn't really sure which direction I should go in, like what's going to be the topic that I'm going to be able to carry for almost a year. Like it's a big commitment. But once I got that down, I felt like it wasn't too hard. I mean, I'm not like too fond of research, so I guess it was like a bit of a struggle to like keep reading and keep gathering the information. But I don't know. And in regards to motivation, I'm kind of a self-motivated person, so I'm always trying to present my best. So once I'm working towards that, I feel like it's not too hard. I mean, it wasn't, at least in this process. And also, I was assured that I was going in a good direction. So that also helps me to get going, and it's easier for me to keep writing and working on it when I know that I'm on the right path. Yeah, it wasn't too much of a struggle.
Okay, thank you. You have your supervisor in the panel, actually. And now you already have graduated, don't be afraid. But my question is relations between you and the supervisor. How did it work? What was the challenge? Or did it work smoothly? Or was Michael too strong or demanding?
No, I mean, I don't really can't pinpoint anything that would have been like it's difficult to communicate with him or we had any problems with that. And I think it was pretty smooth of a process, and it was very easy and comfortable to work with him. And I think it's also a huge plus why I had such a good process in this.
Okay, I can't ask the same question for Varvara, unfortunately, but Minna, if you have some advice for the next generations to come to study and about relations with the supervisors or work with the supervisors from the...
Ja okei, ma vastan eesti keeles, et võib-olla sa käi seminarites kohal. Mina seda väga palju ei teinud, et ma ei ole eriti eeskoolik näide siin, kuna ma No see koroonakriisiga kadus motivatsioon ära, nii et ma väga ei käinud seminarides kohal. Mul oli selline grupp, et ma olin Helen Normetsa, oli ainult mina ja mul kursad olime, et me olime kahekesi seal, seega minu see puudumine oli arvatavasti väga teravalt tunda. Aga lõpuks ma otsin end kokku, aga tegin ka endale elu väga palju raskemaks sellega, et võib-olla see, milles ma oleks saanud jooksvalt vastuseid nende küsimustele, siis ma pidin lõpuks küsima kõike korraga, mis muidugi tekitas ka mu juhendajale palju ekstra stressi ja ka ta aitas mind, ja ma olen väga tänulik talle.
Kadi, kuidas teil kulges töö kirjutamine?
Kas juhendaja koostöö?
Jah, võtame alguses just see koostöö juhendajaga, et millised on nõuanded ja õpitunnid sellest protsessist?
No koostöö sujus väga hästi, et ma olen üldiselt selline väga iseseisev inimene, et ma tahan nagu ise teha kõike võimalikult hästi, kuidas ma ise arvan, et on suurepärane ja alles siis nagu küsida nõu. Aga tegelikult sain ma selle protsessi ajal aru, et mõistlikum on küsida alati nõu, kui sa milleski kahtled, et sõnastada oma see kahtlus väga täpselt, aga alati küsida nõu, et tööd ei pea kirjutama kindlasti üksinda, vaid see koostöö on väga-väga oluline.
See oli hea nõuanne. Nüüd meie lühikese minipaneeli lõpetuseks, mis võiks olla veel, Kadi, ma küsin veel 2 nõuannet. Et üks oli väga konkreetselt öeldud, et küsi nõu ja tehke koostööd. Mis võiks olla veel 2 nõuannet?
No üks võiks olla küll see, et kui valida nagu üleüldse teemat, et siis ka samamoodi konsulteerida juhendajaga, aga enda isiklikust vaatenurgast võtta töö, mida sa päriselt praktiliselt endaga ka siis oma tööalale kaasa võtta. Et millest sa näed ka päriselt praktilist tulemust ja sa saad need kogemused ja teadmised panna päriselt ka töösse.
Nii, ja 3.
Ja 3, ma olen siin juba mitu korda seda öelnud ka, aga varuda aega, et kui ma tegin endale ka sellise plaani, et ma tean, et mul umbes näiteks 3 kuud kulub teoreetilise aluse loomiseks, siis tegelikult see aeg pikenes ka umbes 6 aega, nii et ma soovitan, kui teha nagu ajakava, et kui palju mul millekski aega kulub, siis ma soovitan planeerida natukene rohkem, kui sa võib-olla alguses arvad, et aega läheb, sest aega jääb puudu.
Nii, aitäh, väga hea. Nüüd Varvara kord, millised on 3 nõuannet tulevastele magistritööde kirjutajatele? Kuidas teha seda edukalt?
Mis keeles ma vastan?
Paruski. Praegu siis võib vastata, ma arvan, eesti keeles, et siis meil on küll ka veebis vaatajad, et aga vastame siis eesti keeles praegu.
Okei, ma ei tea, kas tuleb täpselt 3, aga ma arvan, et kasulik on nii-öelda võtta seda lõputööd, nagu vaadata seda nagu projekti ja siis hinnata, et mis on sinu isiklik ressurss, sest see on põhimõtteliselt ühe inimese projekt, eks ole, okei, võib-olla 1,5 juhendajaga koos, aga ikkagi sa teed seda kõike ise ja selleks, et see töö oleks kvaliteetne, ma arvan, on oluline see, et sa oskad hinnata, mis on minu isiklikud võimalused ja minu isiklikud ressursid selleks, et seda teha võimalikult huvitavaks. Et see oleks nagu nii-öelda see kättesaadavus, eks ole, see on ka üks suur probleem tegelikult, kuidas sa saad inimese kätte, kas sa oskad nagu hinnata oma enda nagu võimed nii palju, et mitte nagu üle hinnata ja samas mitte teha midagi, mis on nagu võib-olla mitte piisav, eks ole. Et see tasakaal, ma arvan, on oluline ja see on üks asi nii-öelda projekti juhtimisega seoses ja teine on võib-olla see, et ma ei nüüd mõtlen, sa võid edasi rääkida.
Hea küll, sama küsimus, jah?
Jah.
Et esiteks võib-olla see, et tuleks vaadata eelnevaid töid, et põhimõtteliselt, mul oli ka alguses oli suur paanika selles mõttes, et mis uurimismeetodeid ma siis nüüd peaksin kasutama, eriti kui mingi projektiplaani pidin kirja panema, aga siis tegelikult kõik on juba varem tehtud. Et kui sa leiad mingi sarnase töö, siis saab vaadata natukene, kuidas tema on seda sama olukorda lahendanud ja uurida ka oma juhendajalt, et näiteks milliseid meetodeid kasutada. Teiseks, see on küll võib-olla ei ole kõige parem soovitus, aga mina vähemalt tegin oma bakatööd sellise pilguga, et et saaks võimalikult kuulikindel, et kõik tulemused oleksid mustvalgelt kirjas, et nendel ei saaks vastu vaielda. Ma lugesin enne mingit bakatöid läbi, kus näiteks mõõdeti emotsiooni, et minu jaoks on see lihtsalt selline liiga subjektiivne, et ma tahtsin juba oma bakatööd kirjutada juba sellest, et saaks võimalikult objektiivne, et need tulemused olekski mustvalgelt kirjas ja sellele vastu vaielda ei saaks. Et siis ka, kui kaitsmisel hakkab mõni komisjoni liige küsima, siis saad näidata andmetele. Et jah, et võimalikult objektiivselt teha, mina leian. Kas sa oled välja mõelnud?
Okay, my question to Michael. What is, how to put it in a different way to you, because you are now in a doctoral studies. 3 reasons why not to join doctoral programs.
3 reasons not to. Okay. Don't join the doctoral program if you're not 100% sure that you want to do it. That would be, I would say. I don't know, that's a good reason not to do it. If you're not sure, don't do it. Don't do it for the title. Don't do it because you've always wanted to. Don't do it because your mum will be happy if you do it. I would say because otherwise those are all extrinsic motivations, and I think with extrinsic motivations you'll just go insane. With a doctoral studies you have to have an intrinsic motivation. It has to be a hunger for curiosity for the topic. Otherwise it'll take you 20 years and feel awful at the end.
Yeah, and it will be very painful for supervisors too.
Yes, that too, yeah.
Kate, what is, now the question to you. 3 tips or recommendations for students who are watching our video recording. How to be successful?
Like in general or in thesis?
Yeah, you can limit in this way.
Limit to thesis? Well, I can talk about thesis because it's academic job. Well, obviously the 2 things that everyone talks about is to choose a supervisor that you know you're going to be able to communicate with, and to choose a topic that you're going to want to work on, because like I think it can be a very valuable experience to write a thesis, like not a burden that you have to do in your studies. Like if you're actually interested in the subject, because then you're gonna want to proceed and actually find something out. And then second is to really know yourself and know how you work, because obviously I can't promise you how this is the key to your success, because every person works differently. And I know how I work, that, okay, this is actually the 3rd thing, that my suggestion would be to start already early, to think about it, to already start reading early on and noting down things, even though the first notes I actually didn't use almost. I wrote like so many pages of notes, and I kind of just started writing from scratch. But to write and some kind of amount of minutes per day, I know that worked for me, even though like I'm a huge procrastinator in general, but I committed to that goal that I wrote for some time, or I at least read for some time. Sometimes that was easier. So yeah, those 2 things kind of go together, that you have to know what works for you, but also to be consistent. But I mean, obviously, if that doesn't work for you, then you're going to have to figure out what does instead. If you write like in 1 week the whole thesis, I don't know. That's kind of, I mean, it seems scary to me because it's like such a huge amount of pages to write. So it's easier to handle it bit by bit, at least for me. And yeah, like to just keep yourself sane, whatever you do otherwise in your life, keep doing that. I think that's important to still like keep those things in your like daily routine or whatever. Yeah, that's it, I think.
Okay, thank you. And final question is, if you can now look back into the process, now you know quite lot about studies and so on. Will you recommend it? Should you take the journey again, if it's possible, to start from the beginning, if you know what's coming ahead?
Studies in general?
Yeah. Writing application for cross-media program and saying that, yes, I would like to do it. Do you regret that you had studied here?
No, not at all. I definitely chose this program with a purpose, and I think I remained like in the same kind of headspace until the end. So definitely no regrets with that. And this program specifically, like it contained everything that I was interested in, like not just focused in one specific direction. And so in the process, I was able to learn that I was indeed interested in all of those things. And maybe like further, these are like two directions that I could go in. And so like in general, in terms of studies, I would do it again. Like I wouldn't study cross-media again because that would be kind of pointless, I think. If there was like a more in-depth master's or something that was very, actually, I don't know. I don't know what masters could offer in that regard. I think you need to be focused more on something more specific, yeah. But I'm still interested in learning more, and yeah.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Now I ask the same question in Estonian for the three ladies we have here.
Jaa, BFM on minu arust üldse väga vahva koht, kus õppida, sellepärast et inimesed on siin, on juba toredad inimesed õpivad BFM-is ja eriti reklaamialal, et hetkel, kui ma mõtlen tagasi, siis ma ei kahetse seda absoluutselt, et mul oli õnn olla ka viimane kursus, keda õpetas Linnar Priimägi, mis on minu arust hetkel suur kaotus reklaamialale, et teda enam hetkel ei ole. Aga ma arvan, et ka inimesed, kes võib-olla tulevased reklaamitudengid, kes kuulevad, et äge eriala, nii et jah, võib, et isegi kui see reklaamialal tööle ei satu, siis ikkagi igapäevasesse ellu annab see sulle nii palju kaasa. Aitäh.
Ma arvan, et siin on bakalaureuse ja magistrikraad, nad on natuke erinevad, et ma arvan, et bakalaureuse kraad võiks ikka enamusel olla. Magistrikraadiga ma arvan on nii, et kui sa päriselt näed, miks sul läheb vaja seda nagu konkreetselt töö jaoks või on sul mingi konkreetne huvi, et kui ma vaatan oma kursusekaaslased, enamus tegelikult, nad ei olnud lõpuks nii motiveeritud, sest et neil ei olnud nagu otseselt midagi puudu nagu elus, sellepärast, et neil seda magistrikraadi nagu polnud, et ma tean, et mind motiveeris nagu väga palju see, et ma konkreetselt nägin, miks mul seda vaja on.
Ja mina arvan, et alati tasub õppida ja alati tasub saada piisavalt targaks just oma erialal, sellepärast et siis sa oskad oma erialal ka tulemuslikumalt töötada ja tegelikult üleüldiselt selline magistrikraadi omandamine paneb sind võib-olla ka laiemalt mõtlema üleüldse asjade üle enda ümber ja ka muus elus, et saad olla ka igapäevaelus võib-olla selline teadlikum ja oskad ennast nagu paremini juhtida, saad endaga paremini hakkama üleüldse.
Yeah, Michael actually already answered this question. What will be these final words you would like to say our audience? You are the filmmaker, you must have this dramatic moment.
what to say. I would say that it's always worth pursuing greater knowledge, not just for the academy, not just for the world, but for yourself, and to increase your understanding of the things that are interesting to you and that you're passionate about. And I would encourage everyone to continue. Anyone who's here, they're ready to do their thesis this year, I see in the audience. And enjoy the process and discover something about the subject that you're going to study and also about yourself in the process. That's what I would say.
See oli ilusti öeldud. Aitäh selle konverentsi korraldajatele ja loodetavasti kohtume juba järgmisel aastal uuesti. Aitäh kõigile! Tänud!